The man merely waved the small knife in his hand with a casual flick, yet the two top human experts were instantly shocked on the spot. Because with that single stroke, he had actually sliced open a fissure in space itself. Even the old man, hailed as the Sword Emperor, never imagined that the pinnacle of swordsmanship he had pursued his entire life would manifest in a freshman who had just arrived. What they didn't know was that the man had awakened a blessing called Sword God. Its effect could be summed up in just 4 words: slash and cut all. But every time he gripped a sword, he had to endure pain as if struck by 10,000 thunderbolts. However, when the man transmigrated into the original host's body, the host had just awakened a blessing called Painless. This blessing erased all sensation of pain, but only for 30 seconds, and with a cooldown of 12 hours. Yet if used together with Sword God, for those 30 seconds, he was truly invincible. In truth, I was originally just a chef, but at 21, I'd already held a knife for 20 years, and within the industry I was long dubbed the Knife God. Then one day, I was suddenly transported into a game I used to play. Even more unexpectedly, I didn't even qualify as a side character, I became a background extra, a mere passerby. This world is overrun with magical beasts, but humans possess blessings, innate abilities not unlike special skills. Yet not everyone can awaken a blessing, most rely on inheritance. The nobility, under the banner of cultivating heroes, founded Joaquin Academy. Lately, the academy has also begun recruiting special students from non-noble backgrounds. The original host only obtained a special admission spot because he accidentally awakened the Painless blessing. Now, looking at the Sword God blessing I brought with me, I can only sigh in resignation. Because it only works on swords shorter than 30 centimeters and narrower than 5 centimeters. Those are the exact dimensions of a standard sashimi knife. So even after crossing worlds, I'm still nothing but a cook. The next day, I still went to Joaquin Academy to register, only to be stopped at the gate by the guard. He eyed the pile of discount sashimi knives I brought and asked if these were my weapons. School rules required every new student's weapon to be inspected. The guard figured that, every year, some noble scion liked to make a joke out of him, and assumed I was here to cause trouble. Determined to make an example this time, he slammed the table and scolded me for being outrageous. But I insisted, these were my weapons. He paused, just about to continue lecturing me, when I interrupted. I'm just a regular special admit, my family struggles to afford even the tuition, so asking them for an expensive weapon would be unfilial. Hearing this, the guard started to regret his earlier words, berating himself for giving a hard time to such a dutiful child. Then I added, only the weak care about equipment, real masters never fuss over their weapons. Moved to tears on the spot, he let me through the screening while apologizing profusely. The other noble students, upon hearing I was a special admit, all shot me looks of disdain. Inside the academy, I was just about to rest, when the intercom announced that the class placement exam was about to begin. I pulled a sashimi knife from my bag, planning to warm up my hands. After all, I'd been gripping this blade for 20 years. The moment I drew the knife, a surge of electricity raced through my entire body. A system message popped up, weapon meets requirements. Sword God blessing activated. I hadn't expected that just unsheathing the sword would automatically trigger the blessing. Immediately after, the system warned, body level too low, weapon level insufficient as well. A second later, the surge of electricity nearly knocked me out cold. Before my eyes, space itself seemed to split open, forming a tunnel. I was utterly stunned, and the sashimi knife slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. The rift in space slowly healed itself. I knew perfectly well that if the Painless blessing hadn't triggered automatically, I'd probably have died from the agony. Just then, the intercom sounded again, summoning everyone to assemble. Looking at the knife on the ground, I couldn't just leave it there, so I crouched down and tried picking it up again. Predictably, the knife gave me another sharp jolt. Meanwhile, the training grounds were abuzz with excitement, and the stands were packed with dignitaries and nobles. Suddenly, the arrival of one man drew everyone's gaze. He was the Sword Emperor, the 7-star hero, Siegfried von Nibelung, the strongest of all humans. Another figure approached Siegfried, greeting him. It was Medea Poison, also a 7-star hero and a sage. They exchanged brief pleasantries. Last time we met was half a century ago, wasn't it? Siegfried quipped, you're the academy principal now, but you still dress so flamboyantly. Medea replied with a smile, if you want to stay young forever, you can try my blessing. I looked around, taking in the noble students with their dazzlingly colored hair. I never thought I'd end up an outlier, the only one with black hair. At that moment, another person's entrance set off a frenzy. Anyone who passed by her would be instantly smitten. She was Abel, the Sword Emperor's granddaughter, and the main heroine of the game. Next, the group battle would take place in the Academy's manufactured subspace. Inside, you'd feel pain and injury, but your real body wouldn't be harmed. But this year, Medea had changed the rules to a battle royale. 10 people would be assigned to each subspace, and final rankings would be based on survival time. Moreover, this time, there were no weapon restrictions. Siegfried worried aloud. Without weapon limits, wouldn't the noble students have an unfair edge? Medea sighed. This is the best compromise I could negotiate. The academy still relies on noble sponsorship to keep running. Even this year's special admissions policy took a huge effort to push through. Then, as Abel entered, the students in the training ground swarmed her, eager for a chance to speak. But I knew, Abel only ever falls for the protagonist. As for me, I just want to live a peaceful, uneventful life. So I set myself 3 principles: safety, ordinariness, and security. As for saving the world, well, I'll leave that to the heroes gathered here. Just then, the loudspeaker overhead announced the official start of the exam, and the groups were divided according to strength. Immediately, the entire training arena was enveloped in a void barrier. As the seconds ticked by, students who were eliminated were continually ejected from the subspace, returning to the real world. However, the principal wasn't surprised by the rate at which students were dropping out. After all, this year's cohort included not only the Sword Emperor's granddaughter, but also heirs from the Chang Sung and Jeilgung families. Before long, Siegfried saw that only the final group remained on the field and was about to leave. But just as he took a step, he suddenly stopped dead, his pupils contracting sharply. The principal also sensed that something was off and quickly looked toward the center of the arena. At that moment, Siegfried spun around and shouted, "Impossible." No sooner had he spoken than a crack split open in the space above the arena. The sight stunned everyone present. Even the 2 top experts were left dumbstruck. The fissure widened further and further, eventually tearing open a gaping hole. Then, 2 people tumbled out of the rift. But the spatial tier didn't close. Siegfried stared hard at the opening, as if waiting for something else. Finally, my sashimi knife fell through as well, landing right next to my head. Time rewinds to 30 minutes earlier, in the subspace. I'd been assigned to the group of death, because it included the Iron family's infamous evil twins. These brothers were monstrously gifted and brutally strong, but their cruelty was notorious. Every opponent endured unspeakable torment at their hands. I had already watched them toy with their victims for half an hour. Because I looked weak, they hadn't even bothered to notice me. After yet another student died a miserable death, the twins set their sights on a red-haired girl. The younger brother strode over to her, muttering something obscene. He was getting ready to make his move, when I suddenly stepped out from behind a pillar and cursed at them. They glanced at my green badge, the symbol of a special admit, which instantly piqued their interest. The younger brother raised his fist, advancing on me slowly. I thought, if I use the painless blessing, I'll only last 30 seconds at best. But these 2 could amuse themselves with a corpse for half an hour. At that moment, my sashimi knife in the bag began to tremble. I wanted to draw the blade, but the memory of that bone-deep pain made me hesitate. After all, I had just decided to live as an ordinary person. Yet after a brief pause, I still slowly reached into my bag. The twins grew serious, suspecting I was hiding some powerful weapon. When I finally pulled out a sashimi knife, they erupted into laughter. The younger brother squatted down, gathering power. In a flash, he leapt over 10 meters, landing right above me. I instantly activated the painless blessing. The moment I drew the sashimi knife, the sword god blessing triggered automatically. Seeing that I really intended to fight with a sashimi knife, the younger brother laughed so hard he nearly lost his mind. But as soon as he was within half a meter, I swung the blade without hesitation. The laughter froze on his face, for he saw his own arm arc through the air and land on the ground. A wave of searing agony swept over him. I didn't pause, knowing I only had 30 seconds. The younger brother, panicked, turned and tried to flee to his brother's side. The older brother, witnessing all this, was completely stunned. He knew exactly how tough his brother's gauntlets were, and yet, I'd severed them in a single stroke with a sashimi knife. I gave chase and slashed again, this time sending his skullcap flying. The older brother stared at it lying on the ground, too shocked even to run. The red-haired girl, too, gasped in disbelief at the scene. But the older brother quickly regained his composure, reminding himself, this was just subspace. He noticed my awkward knife technique, hardly like a swordsman, more like someone slicing fish. He also saw me trembling all over, and concluded he'd just been unlucky. The real threat was the knife in my hand. He bent down, retrieved his brother's gauntlets, and put them on. With both gauntlets equipped, his strength would more than double. Add to that the resolution blessing for defense, the intervention blessing for extra bounce, and the spiritual blessing for more damage. With all 3 blessing active, the older brother felt invincible. He roared at me, even if that's an S-rank weapon, this ends here. I kept trembling, silently counting under my breath. He thought I was ignoring him, grew enraged, and charged at me from behind, fists flying. 2 seconds later, his whole body was riddled with my sashimi knife, while I didn't have a speck of blood on me. But just then, the painless blessing wore off, and a tidal wave of agony crashed down on me. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying in a hospital bed. The moment I woke, someone by my side ran out to call for others. Soon, the Sword Emperor and Medea entered the room. Though it was my first time meeting them, as 7-star heroes, I knew them all too well. The old man was Siegfried, commander of the 6th Legion that defeated the Demon King half a century ago, now the strongest human alive. Beside him stood Medea, the principal. She looked young but was older than my grandmother. What puzzled me was why such important figures would come see me. After a quick question about my name, Siegfried got straight to the point and demanded to know what I had done. I knew full well that if a monster like him set his sights on me, I'd be doomed. So I didn't mention the sword god blessing, only admitted that my actions had been extreme and said I was willing to accept any punishment. Medea scolded Siegfried, calling him a stubborn old man and asking how he could be so fierce with young people. Then she came over and told me not to be intimidated by Siegfried's demeanor, saying that when I fainted, it was actually he who helped clear my blocked meridians. She added that I should do her a favor and not hold a grudge against him, then winked at me. Siegfried, hearing this, grew embarrassed and scolded Medea for bringing it up, saying they'd agreed not to mention it. I couldn't understand why Siegfried would help me, but I could tell my body felt lighter and stronger than before. Medea continued, saying that while I was unconscious, they had replayed the battle footage together, then teased that I'd heroically protected a weak female student, her very own white knight. Siegfried, seeing Medea's playful attitude, quickly coughed, trying to remind her to act properly. She scolded him for meddling, then gently told me they actually didn't plan to hold me accountable. It turned out those twins had only gotten into the academy through the Mal family pulling strings, and now they were planning to withdraw on their own. Hearing this, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. I'd been worried they might come after me. That's when they revealed their real reason for coming, to congratulate me on placing first in the exam. But I couldn't muster any joy, since it violated all 3 of my core principles: safety, ordinariness, and security. I immediately stated that I didn't want the top spot. They hadn't expected that I'd surprise them twice in a single day. Medea was incredulous, asking if I was serious. In fact, the elders hadn't wanted to give me first place either, but the subspace's scoring system was automatic and the result couldn't be changed. Even after hearing this, I still insisted on rejecting first place. Back in her office, Medea sighed that after nearly 20 years as principal, this was the first time she'd ever encountered something like this. She was frantic, asking if I realized what this could mean. Then she turned to Siegfried, demanding if he was only upset because his granddaughter hadn't taken first place. Siegfried replied that the subspace's scoring system was imbued with the will of the first hero. Nothing was more foolish than doubting the system. Since the academy had already recognized me as the top student, they had no choice but to accept it. At this, he recalled the slash I had delivered in the footage. That single strike was the very embodiment of severance, the ultimate swordsmanship he'd spent a lifetime pursuing. But when he'd helped clear my meridians, he had discovered that my body didn't seem trained at all. He suspected my physique and power were completely mismatched, as if I was never meant to possess such strength. This suspicion reignited a long-dormant competitive spirit within him. Medea then teased that not only was I handsome, but also kind-hearted. If she were 10 years younger. Halfway through, she hesitated, then laughed that now would be fine, too. Siegfried grinned and asked if she knew what college students nowadays called women like her. I'd like to hear it. Go on, tell me, what do they usually call someone like me? She pretended indifference, but was clearly intrigued. Siegfried responded with a word that started with B. The principal shot to her feet the instant she heard it. After that, she led me to the Wolf class classroom. Honestly, I had no interest in joining a high-level class that required constant fighting. I just wanted to coast through the lowest, Tiger class, and graduate quietly. But the principal told me the top scorer wasn't allowed in the Tiger class. Wolf class was already the lowest level she'd managed to negotiate for me. Still, she promised to keep my first place finish a secret. Yet, the moment I walked in, every eye in the room focused on me. But they quickly realized I was a special admit, and soon went back to their own conversations. Judging by their reaction, my identity as the top student hadn't leaked. At last, I could enjoy some peace as a nobody. Just then, the girl I'd saved the previous day walked over to thank me. Truthfully, saving her hadn't been entirely selfless. If she died, I would have been next in line. I told her no thanks were necessary, and introduced myself as Kang Jian Ma. She quickly introduced herself as Chloe. But I'd only played about half of this game, and couldn't recall any character named Chloe. Besides, I knew the main story ahead would be all about fighting the demons. If she were some late-game new character, it would be far too abrupt. So I figured she must be a background character like me. I leaned in and asked if she could keep what happened during the exam a secret. She agreed at once, then seemed to want to say more, but before she could, The instructor called everyone back to their seats. I didn't think much of it and said we'd talk next time. The instructor came to the podium and introduced himself as Lee Won-bin, the Wolf class coach. He announced that we'd be doing a simple endurance workout today, and told everyone to change and meet at the training grounds in half an hour. Someone raised a hand to ask what the workout involved. Lee Won-bin replied it was simple: 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and 10 laps around the training field. After everyone left, I lingered at the podium. I needed a way to skip this torturous routine. So I told the instructor I wasn't feeling well. Before I could finish, he remembered the principal's warning that I was the top scorer, and cut me off, saying he understood, this workout wasn't even a warm-up for someone like me. Then he suggested I go train with the star class instead. After all, the principal had said I could attend any class I liked. My face darkened. I silently cursed the principal for her big mouth. So much for keeping my secret. I quickly said it wasn't necessary, that I just remembered I needed to use the restroom, and that his training plan was actually perfect for me. So everyone started running laps, and I was soon left gasping at the back of the pack. That's when Chloe noticed I was struggling and came over to check on me. I assured her I was fine, so she asked how many laps I'd done. I told her it was my 5th, then asked how many she'd finished. Turned out, the girl had already done 9. For a moment, I honestly felt like a total loser. And so the week dragged on. During that week, I ran into an unexpected problem. The school didn't provide meals, and the cafeteria prices were outrageous. I didn't have any credits left, so I just swallowed my hunger. If I'd known, I would have accepted the money my father tried to give me before I left. Now, I barely had enough for a single bottle of water each day. Then, suddenly, a status window popped up. My body had leveled up to level 2. The maximum sword length I could control had increased by 2 centimeters, and the width by 1 centimeter. I checked myself in the mirror. I was noticeably stronger than before. I figured it was thanks to the Sword Emperor helping me clear my meridians. Just then, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, it was Chloe. I asked what brought her here. It turned out she hadn't seen me in the cafeteria for a week and was worried I might be sick. I put up a front, saying I didn't like other people's cooking, though I was actually starving. Chloe asked if I wanted to go to the campus store to buy ingredients and have dinner at her place that night. I didn't hesitate for a second, threw on my coat and dashed out so fast that Chloe was left gaping. That night, we ate in her dorm. She kept praising my cooking. When I heard she liked fish, I checked her fridge. After all, I'd been filleting fish for over a decade in my previous life. But now, every time I picked up a knife, there was a risk of disaster. So I asked if she had a longer knife. A while later, she actually brought over a katana. After thinking it over, I decided against it. Instead, I activated Painless Blessing, 30 seconds to get everything done. Scaling, deboning, gutting, cleaning, slicing, everything took me just 21 seconds. Chloe tasted the fish and marveled at how it could be prepared this way. After dinner, she went off to wash the dishes on her own, while I hummed a tune to the moonlight. Just then, a gust of wind knocked a little notebook off the table. I bent to pick it up. Turned out it was a diary. I was about to put it back, but accidentally opened it. On the first page, she'd written about greeting me when I'd first entered the class. I'd thought she was cute and a bit shy. But when I turned the page, I froze. The whole page was crammed, line after line, with the words "I love you." I hadn't even processed it when I suddenly heard the sound of breaking dishes behind me. I turned around. Chloe was staring straight at me. In that moment, an unmistakably dangerous aura radiated from her. Chloe came from the Auditore de Sicilia family. They had always operated in the shadows, maintaining order and carrying out assassinations. The family had a rule: every member must undergo psychological reconditioning before coming of age. Through all sorts of cruel training, they learned to suppress every last trace of emotion. The goal was to turn them into emotionless killing machines. Chloe grew up in just such an environment. By the time her sense of self was nearly erased, with only a sliver of feeling left, it was also time for her to enter the academy. In truth, every member of her family was strong enough to qualify for advanced classes. But because the family always worked behind the scenes, they had an agreement with the academy: their members could only join the lower level classes. Right before she left, the family elders reminded her again, not to attract attention. And so, her family stole away 3 years of her adolescent freedom. Chloe never resisted her fate. She knew no matter what she did, nothing would change. Until the class placement exam, when she met me. Even though people couldn't truly die in subspace, it was Chloe's first time facing death, and she was still afraid. My appearance was like a ray of sunlight piercing the clouds and shining into her heart. She couldn't even tell anymore whether I was swinging my blade to attack or to protect her. All she knew was that something inside her was churning, burning. That night, back in her dorm, she remembered a fairy tale she'd secretly read as a child. In the book, A prince rescued the princess trapped in a castle. Without thinking, she began to imagine me as her own prince. Just the thought made her blush and set her heart fluttering. A vague, unfamiliar feeling began to blossom quietly within her. Chloe thought to herself, maybe this was what love felt like. Meanwhile, I was panicking after being caught reading her diary. My mind raced, replaying where it all went wrong. Maybe it was the moment I peeked at a girl's private thoughts, or maybe it was agreeing to dinner without thinking. She stared at me, silent, and I scrambled for an excuse to escape. She pulled off her gloves as she asked if I had seen everything. Right then, I felt like she was a totally different person. Before I could answer, she had already drawn the long blade from her waist. That movement startled me so badly, I stumbled backward all the way to the window. A glance behind told me we were on the 4th floor. Jumping would turn me into a pancake. The only way out was behind her. She dragged her sword, advancing on me step by step. Seeing her like this, I suddenly realized what type of person she was. That unwavering gaze, those eyes tinged with dark bronze, I was sure now, she was a yandere. And with her sudden, chilling tone and demeanor, she might even have a split personality. A yandere was bad enough, but if she had a double personality, then reading her diary had probably triggered her switch. At that moment, her killing intent was even stronger than those twins from the Mao family. Suddenly I remembered, when I was filleting fish earlier, it took me only 21 seconds. That meant I still had 9 seconds left on my painless blessing. But the problem was, my sashimi knife was still in my room. If I tried to use the kitchen knife here, I'd probably lose a hand before I could even move. Meanwhile, Chloe had already started her draw stance. Desperate, I spotted a utility knife on the table. With Chloe closing in, I snatched up the box cutter. At that moment, the system notified me that my mental attribute had increased, and that my words and actions now carried a sense of pressure. Use willpower to adapt to your current state. I activated Sword God's blessing. When she was just 10 centimeters away, I said, Chloe, your hair is a bit long, let me trim it for you. Then I slashed out with the utility knife. The next thing she knew, she woke up in bed. Her first reaction was to search for any trace of me. All she remembered was sneaking a glance at me while she was washing dishes. Everything after that was a blank. Suddenly, as if remembering something, she frantically searched for her katana. Seeing it still sitting by the table, she breathed a sigh of relief. She often lost consciousness the moment she picked up her sword, and the elders of her clan considered it a sign of exceptional assassin's talent. But now, she couldn't help but worry, had she said or done anything strange while she was out? If she did something embarrassing in front of the person she liked, how would she ever face him again? That's when she realized her hair was shorter, and saw a utility knife on the floor. She guessed she must have cut her hair herself while unconscious. She glanced at the trash can and found the area had been tidied up. Those little things made her feel cared for. She thought, I have to record this in my diary before I forget. Her last entry was just 5 words, Jiam Ma, I love you. As for me, the moment I got out, I started vomiting uncontrollably. I'd been 5 seconds over the limit fighting Chloe, and the pain nearly made me cough up bile. I'd finally had a good meal, only to throw it all up. Thinking back on that fight, I realized something was off. Normal swordsmanship was about finishing or suppressing the opponent in a single blow. But Chloe's technique was coldly relentless. Every strike went for my vitals. Just like a killer who'd carried out countless assassinations, eyes filled with nothing but murderous intent. If she'd attacked me by surprise, I wouldn't have had a chance to react. Luckily, I'd instinctively aimed for her neck, but the box cutter was too short, so I ended up only cutting her hair. All I ever wanted was to be a perfectly ordinary, invisible person, and it turned out to be so hard. When I first entered this game, I'd even thought of becoming the protagonist. But the protagonist had the Miracle's Blessing, one of only 2 legendary blessing left in the game, and wielded the SS rank artifact Balmung. Meanwhile, I was stuck with a sashimi knife. I shook my head hard, banishing those unrealistic fantasies. According to the normal game flow, the protagonist should be discovering his blessing and registering late for school around now. But I only had a rough idea of the story. I'd never finished the game. So once again, I resolved to just be a nobody and live quietly. If I remembered right, the plot would take a dark turn in the 2nd semester of 3rd year. That's when the demons would sense the birth of a human hero who might threaten them, and the real war between demons and humans would begin. Still, when that day came, I'd need to be able to protect myself. Games like this always ended with the protagonist leading everyone to defeat the Demon King. There were still 3 years left before the war, and I had to get stronger during that time, but not stand out too much, or I'd get sent to the front lines. Just then, a girl came over and told me I was sitting in her spot and to please move. I looked up and, to my surprise, it was Abel, drenched in sweat. Her sudden appearance startled me so much I couldn't react for a while. She asked again if I could move, pulling me back to my senses. I was just about to get up and leave when she stopped me, saying there was no need, I just needed to scoot over. I quickly slid to the side, thinking, aren't these benches for everyone? Or does she think she's special? Then I thought better of it, getting involved with the heroine might alter the main story. She sat down and kept fanning her collar, trying to cool off. Watching her, I couldn't help but swallow. No wonder she was the protagonist's girl, she really was beautiful. But to my surprise, she started a conversation, saying this was the best spot for stargazing. For a moment, I doubted if this was the Abel I knew. In the game, she was famous for being aloof, ignoring even the handsome protagonist. When I didn't respond, she asked if I used a sword as well. I hesitated, asking how she knew. She said, my grandfather told me, a swordsman's eyes are different from ordinary people's. I thought to myself, if you're going to talk, why are you blushing? Even more unexpectedly, she offered me her own sword to try. I just brushed her off, saying I wasn't interested. Abel clearly hadn't expected a refusal, her hand froze mid-motion. After a moment of silence, she suddenly asked if I recognized her. I thought, who at this school doesn't know the Sword Emperor's granddaughter, Abel? But I just said I'd probably heard of her. She replied, don't you think that's unfair? You know my name, but I don't know yours. I countered that since we just met, there was no need for names. Abel just smiled and said, what if I'm actually a spy sent by the Demon King? Besides, isn't it suspicious for you to be here alone so late at night? I wanted to retort, that's your justification? So I asked why she was here alone. She pointed to her sweaty brow and said it was obvious she'd just finished training. I played along and said I just exercised too. She asked what kind of training. I answered, dead serious, that I'd been practicing my breathing. That left her speechless. Then I noticed there was a wound on her hand. She caught me looking and quickly hid it. The two of us fell into a brief silence before I finally asked if there was any need to push herself so hard. She sighed and said that no outsider could understand what it meant to inherit the Nibelung bloodline, always having to be number one, always having to be perfect. Even a single flaw meant endless practice. And this year, she hadn't even gotten first place. She added that it was the first time in her life she'd been defeated. She felt a little bitter about it, but thinking about it from another angle, she was also a bit relieved. She was curious about the person who had beaten her and wanted to give them a piece of her mind if they ever met. I was listening intently, but her last sentence nearly made me laugh out loud. She said she'd pestered her grandfather about it, only to learn that the first place winner wasn't even in her league, and that person hadn't even bothered to attend the winner's ceremony. So she felt a bit humiliated as the runner-up. I asked why she was telling me all this. She gave a wry smile and said it was strange to complain to someone she'd just met. But since I wanted to know, she told me the reason. I looked weak. Their family was strict with the strong and lenient with the weak. It was the family rule. Besides, everyone else in class was either useless or a sycophant, so she had no friends. At last, I understood why she was so cold to the protagonist. We sat together a while longer, until she checked the time and said she had to go. Just as she was leaving, she remembered something and turned back to say I still hadn't told her my name. In the end, though, I never did. Campus life afterwards was actually even quieter than I'd imagined. Chloe gradually blended into the class and made new friends. As for me, afraid to meet her eyes, I always dodged her gaze out of habit. Sometimes, Chloe's friends would give me, the special admit, looks of disdain, but I'd stopped caring much. After all, I wasn't the only special admit in Wolf class, there were a few of us, though we didn't have much in common. Compared to the higher level classes, this one wasn't bad at all. Now, in the Star and Dragon classes, students had already started forming cliques and competing behind the scenes. Most importantly, the principal gave me a faculty card, saying it was a perk for first place. She even apologized, admitting she should have given it to me sooner but had forgotten. Looking at the black card in my hand, I thought, this is such a big favor, I'll have to bow a little deeper every time I see the principal from now on. These days, my life was as calm as still water, and I'd barely affected the main storyline. If things kept going like this for 3 more years, I might really get the peaceful future I dreamed of. One day, the teacher was lecturing in class. He said that after the first human-demon war broke out 700 years ago, Joaquin Baylor, the hero, realized the next generation of heroes had to be cultivated, so he founded this academy along with his 7 disciples. The teacher emphasized that this part would definitely be on the exam, so everyone had to memorize it. I sat at my desk, struggling to stay awake. I already knew this stuff by heart. Joaquin Baylor was the founding human hero. He fought the Demon King's right hand, 1st Legion Commander Lycan, for a full 20 years. Although he finally won, he lost an arm and could never fight again. After that, the full-scale human-demon war erupted, with misery everywhere. The conflict devastated both sides, with no clear victor. Luckily, in the end, humans and demons signed a truce. Joaquin built the academy to train future heroes. After the teacher finished, other students said there was no way war would break out again these days. But only I knew, the shadow of war was already creeping in. I thought about warning Principal Medea, but that would disrupt the main storyline, and who knows what consequences it might bring. Even though Medea always claimed she didn't want to be principal, and last time, she even joked about running away together. By the plot, she's the first to sense trouble. Among the 7-star heroes, she's always the first to rush to the front lines to protect the students. I never played to the end, but I'd seen short clips online. She's also the first of the 7 stars to die in battle. Since coming to the academy, she'd treated me better than anyone. Knowing that kind of spoiler. Sometimes ignorance really is bliss. After class, the students surged toward the door, excitedly discussing something. I snapped out of my daydream and caught a few key words, then immediately checked my phone. That's when I remembered, it was the day that person enrolled. Normally, he'd be in star class, so he shouldn't have shown up here. But when he arrived, every student around gazed at him in pure adoration. He was the protagonist of this world, Leon van Reinhardt. This was also the day the 7 centuries of peace began to crack. Leon was living proof that looks are justice. In the game, he basically attracted every female character. If the game were R-rated, he'd probably exhaust himself before even facing the Demon King. All the women drawn to him were powerful, each with serious background. Like the Spear Saint's niece, Rachel, the Bow Master's daughter, Saki Ryozo, and of course, the Sword Emperor's granddaughter, Abel. I didn't like him, but 3 years from now, he'd be among the first chosen for the battlefield. Looking back, Joaquin only sealed the 1st Legion commander, and even the Demon King's lieutenants were monsters. It's hard to imagine how terrifying the Demon King himself must be. Suddenly, a thought flashed through my mind. What if this game actually ended with the protagonist's defeat? Just then, he seemed to sense something and glanced in my direction. That sudden look made my heart skip a beat. The next second, he flashed me a smile that could melt anything. Sure enough, the protagonist's face just makes people like him instinctively. Even I felt swayed by it before I realized. That afternoon, I practiced alone in the training grounds with a wooden sword. Now, as long as I didn't use a blade of the right specs, Sword God's blessing wouldn't activate. My goal was to get used to a longsword as soon as possible. Chloe came by, asking if I was mad at her. Honestly, I wanted to tell her I'd nearly been killed by her the other night. But since we still had years ahead of us, I just brushed it off. Not at all. Maybe I'm just tired lately. Every time I thought about that night, I couldn't help but wonder what her true identity was. Because that night, I hadn't just felt the killing intent on her sword, I even felt like the sword itself was crying out for help. Chloe hesitated, then asked if she could buy me dinner. If I hadn't seen that chilling look in her eyes that night, I'd probably have agreed instantly. But seeing her hopeful expression, it was hard to refuse. Still, I worried that if I said yes, I might wake up the next day not in my bed, but as chopped meat in her fridge. That's when inspiration struck. I decided to ask her for a favor, and she had to be the one to help. The moment Chloe heard she was the only one who could help, her heart started racing and she nervously asked what it was. I scratched my head and said I wanted her to teach me swordsmanship that evening. That way, I could quickly improve my skills, and have a perfectly reasonable excuse. When I arrived that evening, I found Chloe already waiting for me. It turned out she'd arrived at 6:30, even though we'd agreed to meet at 8. Only then did I notice the clear lines of muscle and defined abs on her body. No wonder she was so strong. I hadn't realized it before with her school uniform on. Chloe noticed me staring and immediately blushed, looking flustered and unsure what to do. I handed her a practice wooden sword. She took it and asked why we weren't using real swords. Her family always trained with live blades. I quickly reminded her this was just training. Wooden swords were a lot safer. She gripped the wooden sword and tested its weight. With a seemingly effortless swing, she unleashed a blast that sent dust swirling off the ground. Watching that, I couldn't help but tremble. Her strength was simply terrifying. Still, before we started, I decided to check my own status. With each level up, my status panel showed new info, and the sword specs kept improving. But in all my years playing games, I'd never seen a blessing that could keep evolving. I'd never even heard of sync rate, and the string of question marks below left me totally baffled. I had no idea what level I'd need to unlock it. Chloe saw me zoning out and walked over to ask if something was wrong. From her reaction, I realized only I could see the status panel. Before we began, I told her this was my first time sparring and asked her to go easy on me. We put some distance between us, and suddenly the whole world seemed to quiet down. Chloe took her stance, and I could almost see a current of energy swirling around her. In the next instant, she lunged forward in a blur. Before I could react, the tip of her wooden sword was already at my throat. I twisted aside just in time, but she still grazed my cheek. Her speed was unreal. I could hardly believe this was just a teenage girl. Before I could catch my breath, she released the sword with her right hand and caught it with her left, executing a textbook EA/slash right in front of me. I barely managed to block it, but my hands were almost too weak to hold my sword. Still, I spotted an opening and ready to counterattack. But she leapt, soaring above me in an instant. She was even faster this time, and all I could do was drop my offense and raise my sword to block. She hit so hard, tiny cracks appeared in my wooden sword. She pressed the attack relentlessly, giving me no chance to recover. I was forced into pure defense. Every strike carried at least dozens of pounds of force. If any of them landed clean, I'd be done for. I felt like I was about to break. Finally, on another attack, my wooden sword snapped in two. We both froze. Chloe hurried to apologize, but quickly realized something was off about me. The next moment, her pupils shrank in shock. Because now the broken sword was just under 30 centimeters, the system automatically used suppressive force and adjusted my personality. A powerful aura radiated from me, and my humanity level was decreasing. Sword God's blessing, inferior, activated. Chloe looked like a fish on a chopping board to me, and my goal was to create the perfect sashimi. Sensing danger, Chloe immediately withdrew, putting distance between us. But I gave her no chance to escape, darting in with an explosive step. She managed to block, but was obviously confused. She couldn't understand how my speed had suddenly increased 4 or 5-fold, or why my strength had become so overwhelming. From the very first exchange, Chloe realized she was completely outmatched. Before she could recover, I closed in again, slashing down. Luckily her years of real combat paid off. She rolled away just in time. But I was a different person now. With her life on the line, Chloe just wanted this spar to end as quickly as possible. But I pressed her hard, never letting up. Worse, she'd twisted her ankle dodging earlier and had no way to escape. She could only retreat and shout for me to stop. The next second, my broken sword hovered above her head. Seeing this, she summoned all her strength and called out my name. At the same time, my consciousness seemed to flicker onto a cutting board, where a fish darted back and forth, and I could even hear it speaking. As I drew closer, I realized she kept calling Jian Ma. Looking down, I saw my own reflection in the blade, and suddenly remembered I was no longer a mere chef, but Kang Jian Ma, a transmigrator in a game world. Just as the wooden sword was less than a millimeter from her head, my mind snapped back. I immediately dropped the sword, and caught Chloe as she nearly collapsed. She was so embarrassed her face turned crimson, but still asked if I was alright. I didn't say much, just thanked her for practicing with me, then turned to leave. Watching my retreating back, Chloe fell into deep thought. She'd sensed it during the entrance exam. When I saved her, my sword talent was already beyond imagination. Even just now, when she'd unintentionally activated all her blessing, she still couldn't withstand a single blow from me, and I was only using half a wooden sword. On her way back to the dorm, she kept mulling over what had happened. Suddenly, she sensed a shadow ahead and immediately went on alert. A red-haired young man appeared, calling her name directly. Recognizing him, Chloe called out brother. The red-haired boy was Knox, a second year in the Tiger class. He demanded to know why Chloe was associating with someone so lowly since enrolling. Chloe shot back, telling him not to talk about me that way. Knox coldly warned her that if she kept seeing me, the Auditore family would have me eliminated. But Chloe didn't care. As she turned to leave, she said, even if the whole family came after him, they couldn't handle Jian Ma. Meanwhile, exhausted, I made my way back to my dorm, deep in thought. This power, whether it was a blessing or a curse, felt less like a gift from the gods than a kind of damnation. To keep from relying on it, I forced myself to practice only with swords longer than 30 centimeters. But every time that power took over my body, it felt like it was mocking all my effort. And this time, I hadn't even felt any pain. I was like a puppet on strings, a voice in my head egging me on to keep slashing, keep destroying. Luckily, Chloe's shout snapped me out of it. When I came to, I immediately threw away the sword. I could feel that if I held on even a second longer, I'd lose myself completely. Not long ago, this yandere girl had nearly killed me, but tonight, she was the one who brought me back, and the reason I lost control in the first place. So now, I felt both resentment and gratitude toward her. I was terrified my blessing would go berserk again, so I ran from that place as fast as I could. In this world, I never asked for much, just a simple, ordinary life. But after tonight, I finally understood. Some kind of darkness inside me was trying to swallow my sanity whole. 3 days slipped by in a flash. Chloe went to class and left as usual, but she noticed my seat remained empty. She thought to herself, I haven't shown up for class in 3 days. She'd come looking for me before, but as soon as she reached my door, she heard pain-filled groans from inside. She wanted to barge in, but was afraid I'd hate her for it, so she forced herself to hold back. In the past, she'd sneak glances at me several times a day. She was always worried she'd annoy me, so whenever she came over to talk, she was extra cautious. At first, She thought she was just infatuated with the way I'd saved her. But now, she knew that was only an excuse. After another day of class, the instructor said rain was forecast, so training would be replaced by self-study. He looked around and noticed I was still absent. Just then, the classroom door rattled. He instinctively yelled out, demanding to know who dared interrupt. But when he saw the figure in the doorway, his voice died in his throat. I wasn't quite the same as before. A streak of white now ran through my hair. Chloe jumped to her feet and called my name the moment she saw me. I walked to the podium and apologized to the instructor for being late. The others started whispering, "Did he always look like that? Somehow, he seems even more handsome." At lunch, Chloe walked over and, in a careful voice, asked what had happened the last few days, whether something had gone wrong, or if it was because of our sparring. I paused for a moment, then told her I'd just been very ill, and thanked her for her concern. Hearing my thanks, Chloe's heart started to race. Over the past 3 days, I'd suffered something like withdrawal, so intense it nearly drove me insane. I locked myself in my room, unable to eat a thing. All I could do was lie in bed, praying the convulsions would stop. Because during my fight with Chloe, I'd activated my blessing and felt painless. All that suffering came back to me now, doubled and relentless. When I looked in the mirror, I found my expression had grown icy cold, with several new strands of white hair. Seeing Chloe hesitating in front of me, still looking guilty, I realized she hadn't done anything wrong, so I decided to help her let go of her guilt. I asked, "Didn't you say you wanted to treat me to dinner? Is tonight okay?" Chloe stood there as if in a dream, stunned. I added, "Today, I want to eat your cooking." She finally snapped back and blurted, "I can make whatever you want." She even earnestly asked what kind of food I liked. Seeing her happy, I felt at ease myself. I was just about to say I wanted fish, when a tingling sensation ran through my body. I glanced back and saw a strange plant behind me. My gaze flicked to the classroom door. Chloe noticed my reaction and followed my line of sight. There, at the door, stood a man, her brother, Knox. Right now, Knox was watching me with a sly grin. Chloe's radiant expression immediately darkened. I asked Chloe, "Do you know this man?" She nodded, but I wasn't nervous. I walked right up to Knox, telling him to speak his mind. But Knox just stared at me with a strange look, saying nothing. I was confused, until Chloe ran up and told me not to mind him, then shouted at Knox, "Brother, didn't I tell you not to come?" Only then did I understand their relationship. Chloe sounded fierce, but I could hear a trace of fear in her voice. Knox said coldly that I didn't look like much, and demanded, "You'd rather break the Auditore family rules than hang around with trash like this?" Chloe shot back, "Auditore has nothing to do with me anymore." Knox replied, "The blood on your hands won't wash away. As long as you're from Auditore, you'll always belong to Auditore." Listening to them, it felt like the sister was spouting anime lines while the brother was starring in a historical drama. These two really were dramatic. After a few more words, Knox told Chloe to dump this garbage and return to the family. But the moment he insulted me, Chloe's killing intent spiked. I thought, this is getting out of hand. Could she dial it down? At least everyone else was at lunch, so no one noticed. The name Auditore rang a bell. They were a shadow organization that appeared mid-game, specializing in infiltration and assassination. They weren't as strong as other hero families in most respects, but in the world of killers, they were unrivaled. Before coming of age, every Auditore child endured brutal training to become a perfect assassin, a tool for killing. No wonder their members were so formidable. To maintain order, the family purged any internal threats, even if they were powerful nobles. Only now did I realize what it meant for Chloe to have come from a family like that, and that Knox actually looked like a real assassin. After all, what kind of killer looked like Chloe? I glanced at Chloe, feeling something stir inside me. Born into an assassin family, she had no way to fight her fate, forced to live like an emotionless machine. Maybe I couldn't save the world yet, but I could at least change the fate of one girl. With that thought, I stepped in front of Chloe. My blessing felt more like a curse than a gift, but it was a curse that had never let me down. Because of it, I had the confidence to face anything. I started walking out of the classroom, telling Chloe to come with me. Meanwhile, inside, the instructor was mulling over my strange behavior today, wondering if something was wrong. Just then, a girl burst in, calling him senpai and teasing him about losing more hair. Lee Won-bin was about to retort when his phone rang. The call left him stunned. He confirmed several times, who requested a subspace duel. When the voice on the other end repeated it, he realized it was me who'd challenged Knox. Soon, I was sitting in the waiting room, 15 minutes from the match. I thought the paperwork would be a hassle, but everything was arranged in a flash. A few minutes ago, the principal had even come by to remind me, if I insisted on fighting, I needed to be careful. I sat in the waiting room, hearing the roar of the crowd outside. So much for keeping a low profile, all my effort was wasted. Chloe sat beside me, looking worried, certain this whole mess was her fault. I guessed what she was thinking and quickly reassured her, "This isn't your fault. Besides, you already lent me your weapon. I'll be fine." As I spoke, I pulled out the fruit knife from her kitchen. Chloe was silent for a moment, then said her brother was very strong. I smiled. "You're strong too, but I still beat you, didn't I?" Chloe burst out, "That's different. He's the biggest genius in Auditore family history, unbeatable with hidden weapons. He's been called the Night Raid Master since he was a kid." That over-the-top title left me speechless. In the end, it was always like this. No matter how hard I tried to avoid it, I still had to face fate's choices. No one can fight destiny. Like my master once said in my last life, "You were born to wield a blade." The announcement came, and I headed for the plaza. Before leaving, I called back to Chloe, "There are plenty of geniuses in this world, but in the end, the only winner will be me." Then I stepped into the arena. The moment I appeared, the crowd erupted in cheers. I never expected everyone to be this excited. It really felt like I was a gladiator. But I noticed one section of the stands was eerily quiet. When I saw who was there, I froze. It was the star class students. Even the main characters were watching, which made my nerves spike. Nox saw me and veins bulged on his forehead. Because I was holding nothing but a fruit knife, he thought I was mocking him. I could feel his murderous intent like never before. Still, I grinned and said, "A true master never fusses over gear." Nox drew his long blade and coldly threatened to cut out my tongue. Looking closer, I realized he was wielding the Crimson Edge, and he had too. He'd even activated the game's top-tier blessing, Crow Blessing, which completely masked his presence. Despite his top-tier blessing and 2S rank weapons, I held my sashimi knife in my left hand and Chloe's rose knife in my right, utterly fearless. The broadcast announced the subspace was about to open, and all eyes were on us. Before the subspace fully materialized, we'd already leapt into action. When only 10 centimeters separated me and Nox, I instantly triggered Sword God's Blessing and Painless Blessing. A gasp swept through the stands. They'd all assumed a Tiger-class kid facing a special admit would just be a battle of scrubs. But now, even their eyes couldn't keep up with the speed of our blades. Even the strongest star-class students found this fight interesting. Abel, who'd interacted with me before, never imagined the seemingly weak me could fight like this. On the field, my battle with Nox grew ever fiercer. Every slash of his I parried with perfect timing. When normal attacks failed, Nox swung both blades into the ground, prepping for his ultimate move. As the blade struck, deep fissures cracked across the floor. Suddenly he vanished, darting at me like a phantom. In less than a second, he unleashed a barrage of sword energy, hemming me in. Nox thought victory was assured. No one but the family elders had ever survived this move. But what happened next made his eyes go wide. I wasn't just unscathed, my clothes weren't even dusty. Someone in the stands muttered that sometimes you could see what was happening. But the first years only dodged while the second years clearly had more experience. But Abel noticed something else. While the second year was attacking non-stop, she saw I was calmly deflecting every blow. Was it possible I didn't even want to fight? At last, Nox believed it, just as Chloe said, I was no ordinary person. He'd activated his top-tier blessing and still couldn't touch me. He realized he'd been too focused on speed, so now he planned to use a wide area technique. At that moment, I tossed the sashimi knife aside, and gripped the rose knife with both hands. That move infuriated Nox. He thought I was blatantly insulting him. He unleashed his killing intent, pouring it into his twin blades, and coldly declared, "In front of the Crimson Edge, no one." Before he could finish, I vanished. Nox's face went from icy to stunned. All I ever wanted was a simple life, but since I couldn't run, I had no choice but to draw my blade. My body flashed past, and Nox only realized his right arm was gone when it hit the floor. He hadn't even registered my movement, couldn't even see my blade, not until I stopped, and everyone finally saw me. The arena fell utterly silent, you could hear a pin drop. Even the protagonist was shocked, he couldn't believe a human could move at such speed. I knew that with this strike, I'd said goodbye to any hope of a peaceful future. As Nox's head fell, the subspace barrier slowly faded away. Nox couldn't believe it. How could a second-year veteran lose to a freshman? The timer froze at 26 seconds. The next day, news of my 26-second victory over Nox spread throughout the school. Only then did everyone realize that Nox was a professional assassin, a member of the Auditore family. Abel kept thinking back to yesterday's duel, still unable to believe that, besides the mysterious top scorer from the entrance exam, there was actually someone even stronger than her. She knew full well, not even her own grandfather could swing a blade that fast, let alone the fact that I'd done it with nothing but 2 kitchen knives. Suddenly, she remembered that I'd never told her my name. Looking back, there was a good chance I was that number 1 from the exam. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. She'd thought I was just some forgettable nobody, and had confided so much to me. Now that she knew I was much stronger than her, She felt like a complete fool. Beside her, Rachel, who had been asleep, was startled awake and asked what was going on. Abel quickly insisted it was nothing. But the flush on her cheeks didn't escape Rachel's notice. One look and she could tell Abel was hiding something. No matter how much Abel denied it, Rachel wouldn't let up. She tried every trick. Are you hungry? Abel shook her head. No. Did you forget your weapon? Still no. Do you need the bathroom? Another shake. Finally, Rachel asked slyly if Abel had a crush on someone. Abel's whole body stiffened, her guilty conscience on full display. The blush on her face deepened. Rachel immediately caught a whiff of gossip. The next second, she burst out laughing, wild and wicked. No way. You're human after all? I thought you'd never fall in love in your entire life. Abel rushed to deny it, begging her to keep her voice down. But Rachel just gave her a knowing look, already speculating about who could have captured Abel's heart. That person must be really special. Her first guess was the protagonist, Leon. Abel's face went cold in an instant, flatly denying it. Rachel noticed right away that Abel seemed to have a grudge against Leon. So she set her sights on me. Abel's face, which had just cooled, immediately blushed again. Rachel knew she'd guessed right, her smile curving into a wicked crescent. She grabbed Abel and dragged her out the door. Abel, completely confused, stammered, "Where are you taking me?" "Where else? To the wolf class, of course." Not long after, Rachel was pulling a shy, embarrassed Abel straight into my classroom. The whole class froze at the sight of the legendary Abel. Rachel strode to the center, Abel in tow. She hopped up onto a desk, scanning the crowd for the only black-haired oddball, me. A classmate whispered, "Standing on desks is kinda much, isn't it?" Rachel shot him a flirtatious wink. "I'm too cute for anyone to mind." The poor boy was instantly left dazed and speechless, while Abel wished she could disappear, desperate to deny she even knew Rachel. Suddenly, Rachel found her target. But there was Chloe, sitting beside me, her face full of adoration. Rachel wondered if this was my girlfriend. But to Rachel, that only made things more interesting. The next moment, Chloe's pupils shrank in shock. She watched as Rachel leaned down and blew softly into my ear. That kind of intimate move was something Chloe had never dared imagine, yet a stranger had beaten her to it. Rachel plopped herself onto the desk right in front of me. I was still dazed from her breath, wide-eyed as the scene unfolded. As I was coming to, Rachel leaned in, scrutinizing me, and asked if I was Kang Jian-ma. She said she hadn't gotten a good look yesterday in the arena. Turns out, I was pretty handsome. I recognized her as Rachel. But what puzzled me was why she was in the wolf class. This wasn't how the story went in the game. My instinct screamed that the situation was dangerous. Just as Rachel's finger was about to touch my nose, Chloe couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed Rachel's hand and coldly asked who she was. Chloe's neck even made an audible cracking sound. Rachel, however, didn't take her seriously at all. But I'd seen Chloe's other side before. Seeing her like this, my inner alarm bells were ringing louder than ever. Chloe slowly pushed her box cutter forward. For a moment I was dumbfounded. In the game, these two had never even interacted. Thankfully, Abel stepped in on time, pulling Rachel back and telling her to stop making a scene in someone else's class. Rachel waved her off, saying she was just saying hi, then patted Chloe on the head. "Kid, grown-ups are talking, children shouldn't butt in. And don't play with sharp things, okay?" After that, she turned back to speak to me. But by now, Chloe was truly furious. She raised the box cutter and slashed at Rachel's back without hesitation. The sudden movement startled both me and Abel. There was a sharp swish, and bright red liquid splashed everywhere. It was just a classmate's tomato juice, spilled all over the desk. Meanwhile, Rachel had Chloe's wrist in a death grip, the box cutter falling uselessly from Chloe's hand. Rachel said coolly, "So slow. I thought you were just a kid, but it turns out your speed is just as childish." Abel saw things were getting out of hand and quickly told Rachel to let go. Since Abel had spoken, Rachel gave her that much, flicking Chloe's arm away and sending her spinning through the air. Chloe flipped gracefully and landed on her feet. The class was stunned by the spectacle. Everyone crowded around, while I could only silently scream inside. Rachel wasn't just the Spear Saint family's direct heir, but also the niece of the continent's famous Spear Saint. Their family valued strength above all else and dismissed anything but raw power as a mere trick. Rachel moved back to stand before me, asking if the little brat was my girlfriend. I answered honestly, no. But the moment I spoke, I felt Chloe's death glare drilling into me. I quickly added, "We're just friends." Looking at the chaos around me, I had no idea how things had come to this. Even Abel, the game's heroine, was here. The scene had been so chaotic, I hadn't even noticed her arrival. To clear things up, I asked them directly what they wanted with me. Rachel was blunt. Abel had said she was interested in me, so she'd brought her along to check me out. Abel immediately denied it, insisting she'd never said anything of the sort. "You followed me here because you wanted to meet Kang Jian-ma." You followed me without complaint, so I thought you wanted to come. Enough, okay? You dragged me here. The surrounding students watched, thoroughly entertained. No one had ever seen Abel this flustered. Trying to act nonchalant, Abel said it was all just a misunderstanding. I really didn't say I wanted to come. But I thought, if you're really not interested, why not just leave? Wanting to end things quickly, I said, if you're done, you should go. That stunned both Abel and Rachel. In this school, they were both celebrities. Most people would be thrilled just to speak with them. Yet here I was, telling them to leave. But Rachel didn't go. Instead, she plopped down beside me, wrapped her arm around mine, and said I was interesting. She liked interesting men. She even invited me to her room after school to watch a movie. Chloe immediately exploded. Stay away from my Jiam Ma. Rachel grinned maniacally at that and teased Abel, asking if she'd heard. Sitting there, I suddenly missed my mom. But Rachel's smile froze. She suddenly felt a chill down her spine. Finally, she pulled herself together, stood up, and said it was great to meet me. She looked forward to next time. My Jiam Ma. I just replied, don't bother me again. As Rachel left, she kept throwing flirtatious glances my way. When they were finally gone, I dropped my head onto my desk, desperate for a nap. Just then, Abel glanced back at me. Her footsteps never slowed, but her figure tilted ever so slightly. Her hair traced a gentle arc over her shoulder. Her gaze, like a startled butterfly, swept over me and lingered for half a heartbeat, a trace of curiosity and searching in her eyes, so subtle it was almost invisible. Like a dragonfly touching water, the ripple lingered, then she was gone, leaving only a fleeting shyness, dissolving into the flush of her ears. On the way back, Rachel was surprised to have met such an interesting person today. In my shadowed eyes, she sensed a kind of power, the chilling sensation of a blade at her throat, enough to raise goosebumps. Since enrolling, she'd found all her peers hopelessly dull. Not until today did someone truly stand out. She knew, as the Spear Saint family's heir, she was expected to marry the strongest warrior. Now, she thought, I just might be a good candidate. After meeting me, she finally understood why even the usually icy Abel would take an interest. With that, she turned and apologized to Abel. But Abel replied, you shouldn't apologize to me, you should apologize to all the Wolf class students you disturbed. But Rachel's next words left her speechless. Rachel said that wasn't what she meant. That man, Kang Jiam Ma, I'll never give him up to you. Abel stood rooted to the spot, lost for words. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, an enraged Nox was still roaring. I'm going to kill him. As the Auditore clan star assassin, he'd never suffered such a humiliating defeat. Just thinking of the way I'd looked at him, like he was an insect, made him tremble with rage. He was ready to rally the whole Auditore family, to send every expert after me and wipe me out completely. He also planned to bring Chloe home, knowing her potential was even greater than his own. As the Night Raid Master, he decided to handle me personally tonight, to show everyone what a real Night Raid was. But when he pushed open the door and saw what was inside, his brain short-circuited. There I was, sitting by the bed, calmly eating an apple. So, you finally made it. After Abel and the others left today, Chloe remained seated, talking to herself. I could tell she was still furious, but to be fair, she had been the one to pick up the knife first. Chloe kept muttering, does Jiam Ma also like them big? I have to kill her. At that moment, I called her name, snapping her out of her thoughts and back to reality. When she realized it was me, Chloe instantly put on a bright smile and asked what was up. I walked over and asked her about her brother. Chloe said he was staying at the university hospital. That puzzled me. Weren't subspace duels supposed to leave no physical injuries? Chloe said she hadn't visited, but heard Nox was indeed hospitalized without any wounds. She added it wasn't a big deal, and told me not to worry. But in my mind I thought, even though I was the one who cut him down, with Nox's assassin temperament he shouldn't fall apart over something like this, right? Would he try anything sneaky behind my back? So I asked Chloe for his room number, and, recalling some yandere countermeasures I'd learned from videos, I used the ultimate head pat technique. Once I got the room number, I decided to wait for him there. Chloe's shock at seeing me show up was obvious, so I casually remarked, the Auditore family really is loaded, huh? Even the hospital suite is top class. Nox demanded to know how I'd found him. I didn't answer, just slowly reached for the fruit knife on the table. Nox thought I was about to challenge him to a real-life fight, but all I did was start peeling an apple, and the peel came out perfectly thin and even. When I finished, I set the apple back on the table. As I passed by him, I reminded him to eat more fruit. Nox thought I was pitying him, and quietly drew a dagger from his sleeve, ready to ambush me. But just as he turned, he saw I'd stopped as well. I said in an icy tone, if you try to retaliate, I'll wipe the Auditore family off the face of this continent. That sentence stabbed straight into his heart. After I left, he heard a sharp crack from the apple. It had split neatly into 8 pieces. He'd been watching my hands the whole time, but never saw when I'd cut the apple. As I walked out, I thought to myself, Nox wasn't as tough as I'd imagined. At least my threat just now worked. After all, the Auditore family is the continent's strongest assassin clan. My 30 seconds of invincibility would never be enough to take them all on. Luckily they still didn't know my sword technique only lasted half a minute. For now, the Nox problem was settled, but just thinking about Rachel gave me a headache. She's the first one to approach the protagonist in the game, and her personality is a nightmare to deal with. Yet the protagonist has to win her over, and she's even more difficult than Abel. Right now, I really didn't want to get tangled up in all this plot. But the most important thing at the moment was the midterm exam. The reward for this exam was the longsword called Murasame. I desperately needed a weapon not affected by the sword god's blessing to train properly. The test was for 5-person teams to hunt magical beasts together. The point wasn't just individual strength. On the battlefield, trust between allies matters even more. Team battles can be a pain, but if your teammates are reliable, you can coast to an easy win. This time, our target was the D-rank merman beast. Back when I played the game, I'd found them disgusting. Never thought I'd actually have to face them in real life. Honestly, even if I ran into a stronger mermaid, I'd rather not see them at all. But come to think of it, mermaids are basically demi-humans. Compared to the main demon forces, these magical beasts are just guard dogs. In that light, mermen don't seem so bad. The night was calm and peaceful. Suddenly, I remembered it had been 700 years since humans and demons signed their truce. Just like in human history, this world was always plagued with conflict. The classic example was Vasman, commander of the demon army's 6th Legion. Half a century ago, he started a war on his own to revive the sealed commander of the 1st Legion. Back then, humanity sent its top heroes, including Siegfried the Sword Emperor and Medea the Sage. After a week of bloody fighting, humanity won, but 3 heroes died in the battle. Neither side wanted the war to escalate, and that's how the current peace came to be. Looking back on the game's plot, I'd once complained, aren't humans supposed to be the strongest? Why did it take so much to beat just the 6th Legion commander? Now that I think about it, if Joaquin could single-handedly seal away the 1st Legion commander, was he even human? And the Demon King was even scarier than those commanders. There are still 3 years until all-out war between humans and demons. No matter how much I stress about it now, nothing will change. I need to focus on the midterm first. For now, my job was to find teammates for the exam. But when I opened my phone, I realized I didn't have any friends. Then again, I was now one of the most famous people on campus. Maybe someone would invite me to join their team. If I can't keep a low profile these next 3 years, I might as well pick a good team and ace the exam. My goal had shifted from living comfortably and quietly to living comfortably, but not quietly. But to my surprise, a whole week passed, and not a single person invited me. Maybe I'd been too ruthless in my fight with Nox, took him apart completely. Now everyone was afraid of me. That's when I noticed Chloe was also alone, just like me. Ever since that day, she also seemed to have been ostracized. I went over and asked her, and sure enough, she hadn't found a team yet. I checked in and asked if she was alright. I don't have many friends, but didn't you used to have some? Chloe insisted she was fine but thought to herself that as long as she had me, that was enough. So I invited her to team up. Even so, we still needed 3 more people. Chloe agreed without a moment's hesitation. To be honest, I really trust Chloe's strength. The exam is about seeing who can catch the most mermen in an hour. In that case, my 30-second blessing is nothing compared to Chloe's abilities. Just then, I heard someone at the door call out, "My Jiam Ma." I turned around and sure enough it was Rachel, the walking disaster. Chloe, who had just been in high spirits, immediately darkened and mumbled, "The big ones are coming," as she slowly pushed away her box cutter. I quickly told Rachel she should leave, that I didn't have time. Rachel put on a pitiful face, sighing that I was heartless. I waved my hand, telling her not to call me that and motioned for her to go, but she just stretched lazily, clearly planning to stick around. Then with a thud, she flopped onto the desk in front of me, and asked if I'd found a team for the exam. I told her I hadn't. Rachel immediately brightened and said that was perfect, I should join their group. As she spoke, she reached out to touch my chin. I slapped her hand away and asked why she wanted me. "Surely your group already had plenty of people lining up to join?" Rachel said teaming up with others was boring. She figured being in a group with me would be much more fun. I told her I'd already promised Chloe we'd team up. But Rachel replied it was fine, they were still short 2 people. I thought to myself, this could be an opportunity. If Chloe and I couldn't find more people, we'd definitely miss out on the prize. I glanced at Chloe to see what she thought. Catching my look, Chloe nodded her agreement. So I accepted Rachel's invitation. Rachel did a quick something on her phone and told me I couldn't back out now. I asked who the team leader was, and Rachel blurted out it was Leon. Hearing it was the protagonist, my mind went blank. Was this karma for all those years of killing fish in my past life? Having some ambiguous connection with the heroines was one thing, at least there were some perks. But now, I was going to team up directly with the main character? That meant the main storyline was bound to change because of me. Whatever happened next, I'd have to take the blame. By the time I thought about backing out, I realized this witch Rachel had already submitted my name to the group list and turned it into the academy. After all these years, this was the first time I genuinely wanted to hit a woman. Maybe I should just cut her down and be done with it. Suddenly Chloe asked me, in an odd tone and posture, if something was bothering me. I casually replied, "Why do you ask?" She said, "Because after that after that blonde girl left, my expression just seemed off." I made up an excuse, saying it was nothing, just feeling a bit of pressure working with star class students. Seeing I was fine, Chloe flashed her trademark smile again. She promised that even among star class students, nobody was stronger than me. If Chloe was willing to join, it would be too irresponsible to back out now. Besides, this team was honestly top tier in the entire academy. A while later, Chloe and I headed to the meeting spot Rachel had chosen for our group session. I glanced at the green soup in Chloe's hand, 50,001. I couldn't help but lament how ridiculous prices were these days. I took a sip of my coffee and immediately spat it out, bitter as poison. But it was the cheapest thing on the menu, an espresso. To make things worse, this cafe was an outside franchise, so the staff card from the dean was useless here. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was Rachel, saying she couldn't find me. I replied that I was in the meeting room. Not long after, Rachel came in holding her coffee, bringing Leon with her, and someone else tagging along behind. Of course I recognized Leon. But the red-haired guy trailing behind, what was his deal? He looked like a delinquent. As I puzzled over this, Leon walked up and offered his hand. I shook it and introduced myself as Kang Jian Ma. Leon said he'd been impressed by my duel with Nox in subspace a few days ago. Having me in the group set his mind at ease. That gentle, confident voice was so familiar. Wasn't this just the protagonist I'd played for years? After we sat down, Leon suggested everyone introduce themselves. As team leader, he went first, modestly saying he'd only wound up as leader by chance and hoped everyone would look after him during the exam. Looking at his handsome face, I couldn't help but sigh. Life really isn't fair. The four of us already knew Rachel, so she just elbowed the redhead next to her for his turn. The redhead introduced himself as Speed Weapon from Star Class and said he liked heroes. Then it was Chloe's turn. She said she was from Wolf Class, and was Jiam-kun's. But before she could finish, Rachel also chimed in with a snarky Jiam-kun. Chloe's forehead veins bulged at the scene, but she held back and finished by saying she'd joined because I'd persuaded her, and hoped everyone would get along. Rachel hadn't expected the little brat to restrain herself today. Then it was my turn. But as soon as I started to say my name, Rachel burst into applause from the sidelines. Once introductions were done, Leon took out a notebook, and as the projector flickered on, a 3D map appeared before us. Leon explained that during lunch, the instructor had sent all the team leaders a file. This was our exam location, a map of Skopuli Island. On exam day, we'd enter the island via a subspace portal. Only the portal was subspace, the island itself was the real world, so any injuries sustained there wouldn't heal. We needed to be careful. Our group was assigned to the island's northeast coast, along with 2 other teams who'd be hunting in the same area. But the number of monsters on the island was limited. Whichever team hunted the most would win. After explaining all this, Leon asked if anyone had anything to add. Weapon raised his hand first, asking if the mermaids on Skopuli Island would be dangerous. Leon replied that the instructors had already scouted the area, so there was nothing to worry about. Then Chloe asked if teams assigned to the same area could ambush or sabotage each other. Leon said the focus of this exam was monster hunting. If students fought or attacked each other, they'd be disqualified. After hearing Chloe's question, I thought to myself, she really doesn't care if people know she comes from an assassin family. When the meeting ended, everyone left except me and Leon. The air grew awkward, and I wanted to slip out quickly. But just as I reached the door, Leon called me back. He asked me a question that was simple but complicated. Where are you from? When I didn't answer, he pressed, where exactly are you from? I have a feeling you and I might be from the same place. I wasn't sure if he meant hometown, or if he was hinting at being a transmigrator. Seeing that I stayed silent, Leon got up as if to leave. I suddenly blocked his path and shot the question back at him. So where are you from? He turned and told me, I'm from Germany. That night, I kept mulling over the whole thing. After all, getting isekai'd into a game world wasn't necessarily a unique experience. And since he was the protagonist, the odds of him being a transmigrator should be even higher than mine. I glanced at the sashimi knife on my desk, thinking about how my senses become especially sharp under Sword God's blessing. So I picked up the knife and activated the blessing. Suddenly, A line of text appeared in my mind. Leon's existence is of this world. My pupils contracted sharply. That feeling, it was just like when I'd been manipulated before. If I focused while using Sword God's Blessing, I could vaguely catch snippets of that mysterious voice. Sometimes, I'd even see blurry images. But every time I tried to dig deeper, I'd be hit with a splitting headache. Even my painless blessing didn't help. And today, Leon's behavior was exactly like the in-game Leon I'd played before. But his suspicion that we were from the same place still left me confused. If only I'd paid more attention to the protagonist's backstory when I played the game. Regardless, I'd have to keep dealing with him. If this came up again, I'd go ask Medea for help. Last time I saw her, she'd complained I hadn't visited in ages, and even asked when we were planning to make a run for it. Next, I opened my status panel. My physical level had reached level 7, probably thanks to the training I'd been doing these last few weeks. My weapon level was still stuck at 1, but once I got Murasame, that would rise too. And the sync rate I'd never understood was now at 6.8%, almost enough to unlock the next string of question marks. Just as I was about to close the panel, a new notification popped up. The system said I'd met the minimum number of activations for my blessings, and had automatically extended the duration of painless blessing by 10 seconds, from the original 30. I stared for a moment, then realized all the hardship I'd endured was finally paying off. A satisfied smile crept onto my lips. What a pleasant surprise. Over the next few days, everyone waited for the midterm. Besides training, we'd gather to discuss strategies for the exam. Sometimes Chloe would even coach my practice sessions. Whenever Rachel dropped by to cling to me, Chloe would unconsciously flick her box cutter out. In the blink of an eye, 5 days passed, and the day before the exam finally arrived. The next morning, all the candidates gathered at the training arena. I stared at the portal in the center of the square, unable to suppress a sense of wonder at its magic. Just then, someone called my name beside me. Turning around, I saw my 4 teammates had already assembled. After several days of running drills together, we'd settled on our formation. Rachel would lead the attack, standing at the very front. Leon, as team leader, would hold the center. Weapon was our support in the rear. Chloe would be the secondary attacker, up front as well. And I would bring up the rear as our last line of defense. As I walked over, I noticed Rachel gripping an S-rank weapon, the Vermilion Phoenix Halberd. Chloe still wielded that mysterious longsword. Leon, however, wasn't using the legendary Balmung from the game. But when I saw a weapon holding what looked like a recorder as his weapon, I was left speechless. He caught me staring at it and shot me a wary glare. "What are you looking at?" Rachel hurried over and told me not to underestimate weapon. That was a rare S-rank weapon for healing types. I was only half convinced. Back when I played this game, I already knew that even if you spent tens of thousands, you might never draw an S-rank healing weapon. But in my memory, weren't S-rank weapons supposed to look over the top and awesome? Weapons just looked like a glorified stick. At that moment, the loudspeakers crackled to life, announcing that the exam was about to begin. If you encounter danger during the exam, you must evacuate immediately. Remember, you are not heroes, just students. If you're injured or want to forfeit, contact your class instructor directly. Just then, Chloe shuffled up to me, looking a bit shy. I asked what was wrong. She said she was worried there might be mermaids on Scopuli Island. I reassured her, after all the instructors had already scouted the place. But the truth was, Chloe's nerves came from growing up on Sicily Island, where mermaids were a common sight. Even though the demons and humans had a truce and except for the dungeon's demons were rarely seen, mermaid attacks still happened from time to time. When the test officially began, I gave Chloe a pat on the head and told her it was time to go. That little gesture calmed her right down. In her heart, she thought, as long as I'm here, nothing else matters. Together, we stepped into the subspace portal. When I opened my eyes, we were already standing on a little island alive with birdsong and flowers. But as soon as everyone arrived, the first thing they did was drop to their knees and throw up. Leon asked how I could look so unbothered. I told him I never got motion sickness. Suddenly, a merman spotted us, froze, and stopped in its tracks. I locked eyes with it, thinking, is this really a merman? Why is it so tiny? Before I could process it, it turned and bolted. It seemed even using blessing would be overkill for enemies like these. Leon, sensing my thoughts, explained there'd be big ones deeper on the island. These little mermen didn't even count for points. We pressed on toward our assigned area. As we walked, I suddenly felt something flash overhead. When it landed, I realized it was Chloe. I stared in surprise, asking how she could run through the trees. Chloe explained it was basic training in her family, harder to spot that way. Leon asked what she'd found ahead. Chloe reported a cave about 500 meters up. A few minutes later, we were at the cave. From outside, you could make out countless eyes glinting in the dark. Looking closer, it was a group of mermen circled around a campfire. Leon estimated there were 50 or 60 inside. I thought, If we could wipe out this cave, first place would be in the bag. But as team leader, Leon had to put our safety first. Once inside, we might lose signal and be unable to contact the outside. Whether to risk it or go around, it was up to Leon to decide. Back in the meeting, we'd already divided up roles. Once on the island, Chloe would scout ahead, Weapon would cover the rear with buffs to keep the team safe. I'd even teased Weapon, saying it was hard to believe he was our healer. Leon put me on rear guard, in charge of intercepting sneak attacks. I was secretly delighted, looked like I'd get to coast to victory. Leon himself would coordinate from the center, ready to jump in as needed. Rachel, seeing everyone had a job, asked about hers. Leon assigned her position too. At his signal, Rachel, already raring to go, leapt into the cavern, halberd in hand, poised to throw. Golden electricity crackled along the shaft. With a mighty heave, her halberd shattered the mermen's campfire. The mermen stared in shock, but Rachel dropped from above, landing right on top of them. Only then did they snap out of it, shrieking, but it was far too late. Rachel grabbed her weapon and unleashed a sweeping attack, bisecting several mermen in a single blow. Her job was pure offense and chaos, she loved every second. At the same time, Weapon raised his recorder, casting buffs to empower Rachel at the front. Soon, the mermen were fleeing in a panic. To them, Rachel was a demon incarnate. With every swing of her halberd, at least 2 mermen fell, and the more she fought, the stronger she got, showing no sign of slowing. With a wide arc, her kill count hit 24. Thanks to Weapon's support, she didn't even feel tired. Watching from the back, I was awestruck by the scene. Chloe, seeing this, decided it was her turn. She drew her long sword and activated Cat Blessing, then flashed forward, drawing and sheathing her blade in a blur. 8 fleeing mermen were instantly sliced in two. The last 2, realizing they couldn't escape, spun to fight Chloe, but were shredded just as quickly. As the battle raged, Chloe and Rachel drew closer and closer. Seeing neither of them slowing down, my nerves tightened. Were they about to settle their school rivalry right here? After clearing the mermen around her, Chloe charged straight at Rachel. Rachel hefted her halberd and charged right back. Just as they closed to within 2 meters, a massive merman dropped between them. Obviously overestimating itself, it opened its mouth to swallow them both. The next instant, the 2 girls struck nearly simultaneously, blades flashing, but neither attacked the other. Instead, they both went after the merman. In the blink of an eye, it was diced into 100 pieces. Rachel looked at Chloe and said, "Kid, you've gotten faster." Chloe shot back, "That fish was my kill." With that, the 2 dove back into the fray. Seeing that they weren't about to fight each other, I finally relaxed. Just then, a merman leapt at us, only to be cut down by Leon. He turned to me and said, "You seem a bit worried about those 2. Before long, Chloe and Rachel had wiped out every last merman in the cave. I realized Leon wasn't just decisive, he had real leadership. He was the backbone of our squad. He didn't seem like a copy, he was probably a true native of this world. That question he'd asked me the other day, maybe he really just wanted to know my hometown. Lost in thought, I didn't even notice something flash past my shoulder, and punch clean through Leon, who was standing in front of me. The sudden attack stunned everyone. I spun around, searching for the source, and saw a massive shadow looming behind us. Looking closer, it was the legendary mermaid. Everyone cried out, "Why is there a mermaid here? Didn't they check the island?" In that instant, only 2 options remained in my head: run, or fight to the death. But dragging an injured Leon would only slow everyone down and risk total annihilation. So I knew, we had no choice but to stand and fight. Weapon grabbed his phone, but there was no signal, no way to call the instructors. Seeing panic sweep the team, I stepped up to fill Leon's role, barking out orders. I told Rachel to block the new wave of mermen, keeping them at bay. I sent Weapon to heal Leon with his magic. Then I had Chloe run outside to warn the other students and fetch the instructors. Chloe wanted to stay and fight with me, but in the end, for the greater good, she dashed for the cave entrance. Rachel looked back and asked, "Got any ideas?" I slowly advanced on the mermaid. "Leave the small fry to you guys. I want to try my hand at the big one." With that, I drew my sashimi knife. The others looked like they wanted to stop me, but seeing my determination, they fell silent. Just as humans have blessing, the demons have powerful innate magic. Just now, the protagonist had been knocked out by a basic spell, instantly losing the ability to fight. That was the gulf between humans and demons when it came to special powers. Even with Sword God's blessing, I couldn't guarantee victory. Because this mermaid was the raid boss from the game's multiplayer dungeon, and now, I had to face her alone. Chloe would need at least 10 minutes to get back. That gave me only one option. I had to finish this in 40 seconds. Looks like this time, I'd finally get to unleash everything I had. Meanwhile, Rachel wielded her halberd at the rear, holding off the swarm. There were too many, she got careless and let one slip close. She parried in a flash, then hurled 2 more monsters into the stone wall behind her. Gritting her teeth, she skewered 3 more in a single thrust. But now, without weapons buffs, she quickly felt her stamina draining. Behind her, Weapon saw Rachel struggling, but he still had to focus on healing Leon. Leon's wound was deep, but it was slowly closing. Weapon couldn't help but glance in my direction. After that duel in subspace, he knew I was strong, but this was the legendary mermaid boss. Even the instructors wouldn't have guaranteed victory. Just looking at the demon's monstrous form sent shivers down his spine. The mermaid, noticing me approach, lashed out with a massive hand, trying to swat me flat. As her palm rushed in, I dodged aside, raised my knife in both hands, and charged at her torso. I knew her type, water attribute, long-range spellcaster, but at the end of the day, she was still just a fish. And I was a man who'd been butchering fish for 20 years. With that in mind, I kicked off the ground and soared into the air. As light and shadow tore across my vision, I became a black blade slicing through the sky, my knife tracing a cold silver arc. Every move packed with killing intent. The moment I swung at her, she dissolved into water, reforming behind me. This time, her target was our healer at the rear. But her triumphant grin turned to agony, because I caught up instantly and brought my blade down. Unfortunately, I couldn't fly, so I only managed to sever her fin. Landing, I cursed under my breath, then leapt after her again, but again, I slashed at nothing but air. The boss, realizing my swordplay was odd, simply melted into water and vanished. Now I couldn't predict her next move at all. Painless blessing, only 40 seconds. I had to end it fast. Luckily, with Weapon's healing buff, Leon's wounds closed up. I looked over my shoulder at Weapon and asked if he could hang on. He was still reeling from my display. He'd known I was strong, but not this strong. When I checked on him, he stammered that he'd be fine, he could manage. Then I'm counting on you, hero. With that, I dove back into the fight. But when I called him hero, Weapon trembled inside. He'd told me before that he admired heroes most of all. He'd come here because Leon had that heroic aura, and joked that I was far from a hero myself. But now, looking at me, wasn't I exactly the hero he'd dreamed of? At that moment, the mermaid's gills flared wide, and a swarm of purple fish poured from her body, streaking toward me. I leapt over them with ease. Just as I was mocking the mermaid for being slow, the 2 fish suddenly wheeled around and came at me again. That's when I realized, it was a trap. My back was to the stone wall, with nowhere to run. Seeing her plan succeed, the mermaid grinned viciously and sped up the fish with her magic. The next second, 2 sword slashes appeared on the stone wall. Without hesitation, I dove through, escaping the trap. But the fish kept coming, relentless as ever. Seeing this, I sprang toward the mermaid. She kept the fish snapping at my heels. Suddenly, she whirled and lunged for Weapon, hand outstretched. Rachel shouted a warning, but she was too far away to help. The mermaid opened her palm, preparing a spell. I seized her distraction, dashed up with the 3 fish still in tow, and hacked down on her raised hand. Still, I didn't hit any vital spots, just lopped off her palm. But the magical energy had already gathered in that severed hand. The instant it hit the ground, the energy exploded out of control, blasting a tunnel straight through the mountain. At the same time, the 3 fish slammed into her. Elsewhere, Instructor Kim and a student noticed the commotion. Instructor Kim told the student it was actually lightning, and urged her to leave the island for the academy at once. Afterward, Weapon was still shaking. If that blast had hit him, there wouldn't even be ashes left behind. Seeing their boss defeated, the mermaid's minions turned and fled. Rachel watched as the mermaid dissolved into water, thinking she'd escaped. Because I'd spent 30 seconds tending to Leon, I hadn't managed to deal a fatal blow to the mermaid. Before I could think further, a surge of energy erupted from where she'd vanished. Of course, she wouldn't give up so easily. The next moment, battered and bloodied, she burst from the rubble and charged at us. I simply shrugged off my Siegfried and told Rachel, who'd just finished off the last of the minions, to cover Weapon and Leon. Weapon still couldn't believe what he was seeing, me, standing alone against a demon. Maybe, today, he would get to witness the birth of a legend. I had just 10 seconds of painless blessing left, but with Rachel guarding the rear, I could finally focus all my attention on this foe. Now, the mermaid was truly enraged. She came at me faster and faster. I gripped my twin blades tight and charged straight at her. A few minutes earlier, after receiving my order, Chloe sprinted desperately through the forest. The constant bursts of speed left her legs aching and shaky, and she was forced to activate every blessing she had just to accelerate and keep going. Although I was the strongest person she'd ever met, she also knew that every battle came at a cost of pain for me. That was why I always tried to avoid direct conflict, only drawing my blade when there was truly no other choice. This time, our opponent was a powerful demon, and she was deeply worried. She thought, if only she were stronger, she could have stayed behind to help me fight the mermaid. Lost in these thoughts, she suddenly heard an explosion from the direction of the cave. All she could do was pray in her heart that I'd make it out alive. With her stamina running out, Chloe's steps grew more and more unsteady, but she knew she couldn't fall, couldn't stop. She had to find help as quickly as possible. Pushed to her limits, she shouted, "Is anyone there?" Suddenly, she sensed a large presence up ahead. Her senses were muddled, she couldn't tell friend from foe, but she was certain there were mermen nearby. As an assassin, she understood the importance of striking first, so she drew her blade and charged before she could even see who it was. Her attack was parried by another sword. That's when Chloe finally saw, it was a human. Abel turned and realized it wasn't a merman who'd tried to ambush her. Chloe, still airborne, quickly apologized, but her strength was gone, and she couldn't even land on her feet. Abel's group, seeing this, suspected Chloe had come to attack them, and decided not to let her go so easily. They would report this to the academy. But then Abel recognized her as the little girl who'd always been by my side. With the last of her strength, Chloe managed to say, "Help us." She only got as far as Jiam Ma, before fainting. Meanwhile, in the cave, Weapon stared at the scene in shock. To him, I looked like a seasoned chef pinning a live, thrashing fish to the cutting board. I wasn't just holding my own against the demon anymore, I was dominating her. He knew this was a moment he'd remember for the rest of his life. He also realized that I was nothing like the person he'd trained with in subspace. Right now, I was not only faster, my movements were sharper and more precise, dodging every attack and closing in step by step. Each strike was clean and powerful, not a single wasted motion. It was pure swordsmanship, nothing left but the blade itself. The outcome was so natural, it seemed inevitable. It wasn't just Weapon who was stunned. Even Rachel, who'd grown up in the Spear Saint family, had never witnessed such pure, distilled combat. If this kept up, maybe, just maybe, I could really defeat this mighty mermaid. Suddenly, Rachel shouted at Weapon, and dove at him, knocking him aside just in time to avoid a blast of laser light. She warned him not to lose focus in battle, unless he wanted to die even faster. Staring at the deep trench gouged into the ground, Weapon snapped back to reality. The enemy was a demon capable of devastating magic. Even if I had the upper hand now, I was still just a student with a sashimi knife. This fight was never meant to be fair. The furious mermaid raised her remaining arm. In the next instant, countless beams of violet energy filled the air. She brought her arm down, and the lasers rained down like a storm, hemming me in on every side. I dodged as best I could, and when there was nowhere to go, I blocked with my blade. Only then did I realize, the lasers were highly corrosive. Seizing an opening, I slashed at the mermaid. She couldn't dodge and was cleaved in two. Before she could react, I rushed in, ready to finish her for good. But in that moment, with a furious roar, she summoned a writhing pillar of flesh made of mermen, blocking my attack. A faint, unsettling smile flickered on her lips. She tore a chunk of flesh from her own body and swallowed it whole. Immediately, some terrible energy began to gather in her throat. And there I was, still midair, with no way to escape. Behind me, Weapon and Rachel shouted for me to get out of the way, but I could only watch helplessly, cursing inside. Of course I wanted to dodge. Just as I thought it was all over, my consciousness was suddenly pulled to the surface of a vast sea. Looking down, I saw a red thread floating to my feet. I picked it up, and the world was instantly flooded with red light. That familiar voice echoed in my mind, this time uttering only two words, slash. I instinctively spoke the words, and it shall be cut. A sashimi knife materialized before me. As I swung, the blade tore through the air like crimson lightning, splitting the sky. Blood spattered like sparks across a prairie fire. In that instant, the world shrank to just me and the blade. My fighting spirit blazed, burning away all hesitation and doubt. With that strike, I severed the magic, and the mermaid's head fell with it. Time seemed to freeze.
No one could believe what they were seeing. I, a first-year student, had just slain a demon single-handedly.
Suddenly, a mouthful of blood gushed from my lips and I collapsed. Rachel raced to my side. Weapon was about to check on Leon's wound, when he heard a commotion at the cave entrance. His heart jumped, afraid the mermen had returned to finish the job, and he braced for a fight. But it wasn't the mermen, it was the reinforcements Chloe had summoned. Only then did Weapon breathe a sigh of relief. Abel's team entered the cave and were stunned by what they saw. On the ground lay the remains of a legendary mermaid. Abel was at a loss. How could a mermaid appear here, and how had it been sliced to pieces? Then she saw Rachel holding me tightly in her arms, and a wave of jealousy surged up inside her. She muttered to herself, "Is it really necessary to hold him that close?" She shot Leon a frosty glance. Abel looked at her teammates, all barely clinging to life, while their leader seemed more concerned with appearances. She was thoroughly unimpressed. She told everyone she'd already contacted the academy, the instructors would arrive within the hour. So what exactly happened here? Weapon couldn't help but complain, Didn't the instructors say they'd already checked this island? Why was there a mermaid? Abel cut him off. Enough complaining. Just tell us what happened. Weapon shot back. Are you ordering me around, Miss Abel? Abel sighed. No, I'm asking you. Weapon sighed. Even if I told you, you might not believe me, but I'll tell you anyway. When it comes to storytelling, I'm a pro. He then recounted everything that had happened in detail. As Abel listened, her shock only grew. It was hard to believe I'd really defeated a mermaid on my own. It sounded more outlandish than the old fairy tales her grandfather used to tell. But with the evidence right in front of her, there was no way we could be lying. What had happened to me felt like something out of a hero's legend. And she, descendant of the first hero Joaquin and his top disciple Aaron Nibelung, had always been extraordinary. Despite her noble bloodline, she'd refused to be defined by her heritage, striving twice as hard as anyone else. Yet now, even with all her talent and effort, she'd been left far behind by a boy with no clear origins. Her feelings were complicated, a mix of awe and unease. Abel looked at me and thought, perhaps she was just an ordinary person after all. As Weapon recounted the events, he continuously cast healing spells on me. When he finished, he walked over to Abel, asking if she'd already contacted the academy. He felt that some details of what happened in the cave were best kept from the instructors. After all, the teachers had insisted the island had been thoroughly inspected beforehand. Abel pressed him for his reasoning. Weapon analyzed further. No matter how big Skopuli Island was, it was hard to believe such an obvious cave could have been overlooked during the investigation. Clearly, something didn't add up. Abel immediately caught his underlying meaning. Leon realized it too and stepped forward. You mean, there might be a traitor in the academy? Weapon nodded. He couldn't be sure, but the possibility couldn't be ruled out. Abel silently agreed with Weapon's judgment. The cave was too easy for students to find. If I hadn't been there for this incident, Leon's team might not have survived the exam. Even though tensions had simmered during the 700-year truce, the demons had never dared to harm a student of Joaquin Academy. Doing so could easily cross the line into open war. At that thought, Abel's pupils contracted. A bold idea flashed through her mind. Weapon, seeing Abel's sudden expression, guessed what she was thinking and quickly urged her not to jump to conclusions. Right now, they could only suspect a traitor. There was no evidence yet. Leon stepped up as well, saying that if there really was a traitor, and news of my solo victory over the demon got out, I might become a target for the demons. So everyone needed to stick to the same story. Weapon agreed, but felt that after I'd risked my life to save everyone, it didn't seem right to say nothing at all. While everyone hesitated, Abel suggested consulting her grandfather. When I next opened my eyes, I found myself in a hospital bed once again. Relieved to be alive, I pieced together the last thing I remembered before blacking out. As the mermaid died, she'd launched a magic orb at me. I had no way to dodge, but then I saw a red trajectory line. When I slashed through that red thread with my sashimi knife, the magic split like a bursting water balloon. Thinking back, I immediately opened my system panel. My mental stat had increased by 1 level, and my sync rate had reached 7.2%, just enough to unlock a new ability. I clicked the 3 question marks, and beneath the synchronization bar, a new progress line appeared. 1 line of decipherable question marks. At 15% sync, another feature would unlock. After reading the explanation, I realized, the red line inside the mermaid's magic orb was that decipherable line. Right then, I didn't notice the door open. The principal suddenly rushed in, grabbing me in a tight hug, muttering nonstop. She kept saying how worried she'd been, threatening to blow up every single instructor who'd investigated the island. She squeezed so hard I could barely breathe. Noticing my discomfort, she let go and pulled out a small pouch, saying she had something for me first. I glanced at it. It was a subspace pocket. She rummaged inside for a moment, finally producing Murasame. The principal said it was the midterm exam reward. In the game, Murasame was a B-rank weapon. Supposedly, every time it killed, dew would form on the blade, washing away the blood. She put the sword in my hands, saying she wasn't supposed to hand it over in person, but these were special circumstances. After that, she glanced at a dark silhouette standing in the doorway. Seeing he wasn't coming in, she yelled, "Hey, you old coot. What are you so shy for? Get in here." The figure entered. "Medea, how many times do I have to tell you? Stop calling me an old coot. And you're over 70, can't you stop dressing like a schoolgirl?" It was Sword Emperor. With someone so important present, I asked what brought him here. The principal said she'd already heard about what happened on the island from my teammates, then bowed deeply to me. She apologized on behalf of Joaquin Academy. The mistake during the midterm nearly cost me and my teammates our lives, and could have endangered everyone present. Her apology stunned me. I never imagined she, as principal and one of the 7-star heroes, would bow to a first year like me. Medea then swore in her capacity as principal to get to the bottom of what happened. Even the Sword Emperor thanked me for saving the students. Being treated so respectfully by two of humanity's strongest figures left me embarrassed. I could only scratch my nose and mumble that I'd just done what I could. After they left the room, Medea suddenly paused. She gazed out the window and asked Siegfried, "Remember our first day as students? You were lying on a bench, I told you to move, and you drew your sword. It feels like just yesterday, but 60 years have passed in the blink of an eye. Yet 60 years is only a tenth of Joaquin Academy's history. In these 700 years, there have been countless clashes with the demons, but until now, they'd never dared harm a Joaquin student." As she spoke, a powerful aura burst from Medea, shattering the glass in front of her, but before the shards could fall, they were instantly crushed to dust. It was clear this incident had made her furious as principal. After all, before the exam, the instructors had reported that every inch of the island had been searched multiple times. Siegfried was about to offer words of comfort, but Medea suddenly turned and asked, "Is Jiang Ma impressive or not? He took down a mermaid all by himself." She pressed Siegfried for his opinion of me. At that moment, only one word echoed in Siegfried's mind: genius. He'd seen countless so-called prodigies in his life, but most shone for a moment, then faded. In hero families, as long as a descendant showed the slightest promise, they were instantly labeled a genius. The term was so overused it had lost all meaning. He'd even forbidden his own granddaughter from being called a genius. But my appearance had changed his mind. My future was limitless. If there really were such a thing as a true genius, it would be someone like me. He couldn't imagine how strong I'd become with more experience, maybe even reach the heights he'd chased all his life. With that, he said nothing more to Medea and walked away. Before leaving, he tossed back, "I'll be sticking around the academy for a while." Medea smiled. She knew her old friend had never cared to mingle with the self-important noble's children, so if he was willing to stay, something interesting was bound to happen. The next day in class, I realized none of the other students knew what had happened. Clearly, the academy was worried that news of me slaying the mermaid would bring trouble if it got out. That morning, I also stopped by the blacksmith shop. My sword, God's blessing, only worked on weapons under 32 centimeters. Murasame was just a useless iron bar in my hands until I upgraded it. Chloe spotted me and came over to say hello, asking how I'd gotten out of the hospital so quickly. I noticed the injury on her leg and asked what happened. Chloe said she wasn't sure, but Weapon had already treated it. The doctor said she'd be fine after another week of rest. Seeing my teammates all safe, I finally let out a sigh of relief. The victory wasn't mine alone. Even though I'd delivered the final blow to the mermaid, everyone had played their part. Chloe's emergency backup, Rachel fending off 100 foes with her halberd, Weapon healing and buffing from the rear. Suddenly, I thought of Leon, but it struck me that he hadn't really done anything at all. I couldn't help but wonder, was this guy really going to beat the Demon King? At this rate, he might not even make it to the Demon Realm's gate. Just then, a figure burst into the classroom, shouting for everyone to stay where they were. I looked closely. It was Instructor Lee Won-bin. He ordered everyone back to their seats and announced that our class was about to welcome a major figure, who would serve as a co-instructor alongside him. The students immediately started whispering among themselves, but when they saw the so-called major figure Lee Won-bin was talking about, everyone's eyes went wide in shock. Because walking through the door was none other than Sword Emperor Siegfried, one of humanity's most elite. No one had ever imagined that such a legendary figure would show up in a place this unremarkable. Even when Siegfried stepped up as instructor, Lee Won-bin couldn't help but tremble all over. I sat frozen at my desk, stunned by his presence. Meanwhile, in a pitch-dark secret chamber, a man was dragged inside and thrown hard to the floor. When someone grabbed his chin and forced him to look up, he didn't even dare resist, just kept stammering apologies. But the other person slapped him across the face. The woman was none other than Instructor Kim of the academy. She stared down at the man and said, "Elder Claddy, the 5th Legion commander is furious about what you did." As she spoke, she pulled out a strange red and green insect, scolding the man, "How could you be so incompetent?" while licking the bug with her tongue. The man could only keep apologizing mechanically. Instructor Kim slapped him again and threatened, "Say one more word and see what happens." She demanded, "Was it really that hard to half-kill Leon and bring him here? He may be a hero candidate, but right now, he's no match for the mermaid. Worst of all, thanks to your screw-up, that old Sword Emperor is now stationed at the academy, and our chances to act will only get slimmer." The man instinctively apologized again, then suddenly remembered Instructor Kim's warning and clamped his mouth shut. She kicked him in the face, coldly asking if he was deaf to her words and still dared to apologize. The man cursed her in his heart, thinking how outrageous it was for an instructor to treat him like this. What puzzled Instructor Kim was that the mermaid had failed to take care of a group of students. Still, she had to admit, the freshmen this year were clearly unusual. Just then, the man quietly reported that the mermaid had apparently been taken down by a single student. Instructor Kim paused, asking if Leon had done it. No, it was this year's top student, Kang Jian-ma. So, it was the special admittee. Now things are getting interesting. The next day, as usual, we ran laps with instructor Lee Won-bin at the training field. Chloe, nursing her leg injury, was resting off to the side. Seeing her like that, I couldn't help but envy her. Suddenly, I heard someone behind me complain about running too slowly. I turned, and it was the Sword Emperor. Startled, I picked up my pace. The Sword Emperor caught up, asking if my leg still hurt from the exam. I said no, though my mind had gone blank. The legendary Sword Emperor, running laps with me? He was the inheritor of the exclusive title of the first Sword Saint, Nibelung, who in turn had been Hero Joaquin's right-hand man, and who, in the coming Second Human-Demon War, would become Leon's swordsmanship mentor. From here on out, the Sword Emperor's role in the story would only grow. Yet instead of seeking out Leon, he was sticking close to me. If this kept up, the main plotline was bound to veer off course. But I remembered in the game, Leon never did get the Sword Saint title. If he couldn't inherit it, maybe it didn't matter after all? Still, this situation left me uneasy. With the Sword Emperor at my side, all eyes were glued to us. As we trained, the Sword Emperor told me that a warrior's foundation was stamina and endurance. No matter how great your talent, without a strong body, it's useless. Only by building a solid foundation through training can you truly progress. But I felt like I was about to collapse. Just when I thought I couldn't breathe, the Sword Emperor sped up, telling me to keep pace. When I finally rejoined the group, I was gasping for air, barely alive. Was this old man aging backwards? How could he have so much energy at his age? After the run, the Sword Emperor called everyone together and dumped a pile of weapons out of a burlap sack. Everyone was confused, until the Sword Emperor announced, from now on, except during live exercises, no one was allowed to use their personal weapons. If you wanted a weapon, you'd have to pick one from the pile on the ground. This rule left the nobles with powerful family heirlooms grumbling in protest. After some commotion, a student raised his hand and asked, since their futures depended on it, shouldn't they be allowed to get familiar with their family weapons? Why not? The Sword Emperor nodded and said it was a good question, then explained, everything has its origin. The more you rely on high-level equipment, the more you neglect personal growth, mistaking the weapon's performance for your own strength. The student shot back that, on the contrary, it was even more important to get used to your weapon and shore up your weaknesses. The Sword Emperor replied, if you don't have the skill, even the best weapon is just for show. A real master never picks his equipment. Hearing that, I felt a jolt of recognition. That was the truth. I wholeheartedly agreed. Finally, the Sword Emperor added that anyone who could master an ordinary weapon might just earn a high grade on the year-end exam. The moment he finished, all the previously reluctant students scrambled for the best gear. I couldn't help but marvel. The Sword Emperor's eloquence was unmatched. I'd thought Medea bullied him into submission, but clearly, he was no pushover. After everyone made their selections, only a few farm tools and a sashimi knife remained on the ground. I bent down to pick up the sashimi knife, and at that moment, the Sword Emperor's gaze landed on me. Once everyone was armed, he announced today's training would be one-on-one duels, to help us get used to the feel of our weapons. Someone asked if fighting head-to-head without the subspace was too dangerous. Couldn't people get hurt? The Sword Emperor told us, you came to this academy to inherit the will of heroes and become true warriors. Only with training close to real combat can you grow. But fighting recklessly could be fatal. So before we begin, I'll personally demonstrate a sparring match for you. Everyone was abuzz at the thought of seeing the Sword Emperor in action. Meanwhile, instructor Lee Won-bin was shaking with nerves, feeling like this was the biggest crisis of his life. Even if it was just sparring, his opponent was the Sword Emperor. He tried to beg the Sword Emperor to go easy, but before he could say a word, the Sword Emperor stopped him and called out my name. All eyes snapped to me. I hadn't expected to be singled out. The Sword Emperor casually picked up an ordinary iron sword from the ground. The crowd gasped, just holding it, it glowed in his hand. Then everyone started whispering, wondering who that kid the Sword Emperor had mentioned was. For a moment, I was frozen, not sure what to do. The Sword Emperor asked if my injury from the exam had healed. I replied that I was pretty much recovered. He simply said, then pick up your sword. I understood, he wanted to spar with me. My body had mostly recovered, but this was the Sword Emperor. If I really fought him, at best I'd break an arm, and at worst I might lose my life. Yet strangely, I didn't feel any fear. Maybe it was the blessing at work, but I was actually curious to see just how big the gap was between us. Still, with all the recent changes, the main storyline was completely off track. If I sparred with the Sword Emperor now, things could get even more unpredictable. After a moment's thought, I told him, I'm no match for you, sir. Please, put your sword away. At that, a chorus of jeers erupted from behind. I looked up at the Sword Emperor again. and saw his expression had changed. Have you lost even a swordsman's pride? How long are you going to keep hiding your strength? No matter how talented you are, you're just a coward. The word pride struck a nerve, reminding me of my past life. Pride was bone deep, the mark of a national champion swordsman. Now the Sword Emperor was clearly baiting me, and everyone was waiting for me to run away and embarrass myself. If I let anger dictate my choice, I knew I'd regret it later. Still, I tightened my grip on the sashimi knife. Instructor Lee Wonbin tried to intervene, but the Sword Emperor stopped him. He could see I'd made up my mind. The next second, to the astonishment of everyone watching, I slowly drew the sashimi knife, and addressed the Sword Emperor. Cadet Kang Jian-ma, at your service, please instruct me. As my blade left its sheath, it felt as though the very air around us froze in an instant. For that moment, I was certain I'd stepped outside the bounds of the real world. The Sword Emperor sensed the change as well. My sword stroke seemed to confirm a suspicion lingering in his heart. Even at over 70, he could still recall that moment. As a child, he'd once met a one-armed wandering knight. The knight, seeing him practice, borrowed his sword. Then, with a single swing, the knight's blade reached a realm beyond comprehension. Now, seeing this young man he'd watched with growing interest since the placement exam, he wondered if I might be the key to leading him through that same threshold. Bending his knees like a drawn bow, he set himself in an attacking stance, and the instant I rushed forward, a wave of sword energy slashed out. The blade's edge brushed my afterimage, leaving a streak of ghostly blue, as though it had split time itself. Missing with one blow, he immediately reversed and struck again, his weapon tearing the air, speed lines shredding the background. Another swing missed. He hadn't expected it. My speed had suddenly multiplied several times over. After 2 consecutive strikes, I spun around, eyes locked on the sword's tip, and charged again. In that instant, the recklessness of youth and the thunder of old age both became etched in the lines of velocity, breath itself teetering on the razor's edge. With a sharp clang, our weapons collided, scattering sparks like a shower of stars. He felt the darting, unpredictable flight of my sword, while I tasted the unyielding, fearless might of his direct assault. Before I could react, he struck again. I parried, let go, and let the force slide off, the arc of my short blade spinning into a defensive vortex before me. I pivoted, switched hands, and gripped the knife once more. Though the Sword Emperor blocked my sneak attack, my impact still forced him back a few steps. He was startled. My physical state was utterly different from before. Now, I could force him back so effortlessly. He thought my sword weighed a ton, but his was no lighter. His longsword lifted high, after images roaring, a killing move tempered by endless training. When his sword fell, it was no longer just a weapon in his hands, but a resolve forged by the years. Meanwhile, the red-haired boy who'd questioned the Sword Emperor watched, still baffled. He'd thought my win in subspace had been pure luck. After all, my opponent then was just Nox, a mere mortal tier fighter. As far as he was concerned, I was only impressive among special admits. He couldn't understand why the Sword Emperor cared about me, unaware that Nox belonged to the Auditore family, one of the top assassin clans, who, to keep a low profile, had an agreement with the Academy. Their members would always be placed in the lowest tier classes. Everyone else just wanted a good show, waiting to see the Sword Emperor teach me a harsh lesson, to see me fall apart in humiliation. Yet as the seconds ticked by, the two of us held our opening stances, utterly motionless. Confusion spread through the audience, and the low murmur of whispers grew. But Instructor Lee Wonbin was frozen in shock. Though he doubted the Sword Emperor's words before, seeing it now for himself, he couldn't believe I was this strong. When the Sword Emperor had insisted on a live blade spar, Lee Wonbin had hesitated. Wouldn't the principal be furious? But the Sword Emperor only said, "Did you really think I'd duel him with a real sword?" He'd added that he suspected I might reach that place. Lee Wonbin had wanted to ask what that place was, but before he could, the Sword Emperor clarified. He meant the mental realm. Now, in the mind's realm, the Sword Emperor saw me not only arrive, but fend off his attack. He was deeply shaken. In less than a minute of crossing blades, just through the contact of steel, he could feel how quickly I was growing. Seeing me perform so brilliantly, he was filled with satisfaction. So he decided to push even harder, to see if I could still keep up. He raised his long sword, and his sword spirit blessing flared to life. An icy blue flame exploded beneath the shadowy dome. I crouched, spine taut like a drawn bow. This was no longer attack and defense. Would the old era's thunder crush my will, or would youthful sharpness shatter the chains? Even in the real world, the Sword Emperor's presence radiated crushing force. Lee Wonbin recognized that blue light as sword aura. Had the power grown so fierce it broke through from the mind's realm into reality? As the blue light drew near, the Sword Emperor's eyes held not malice, but the killing instinct honed by years. My own tense posture wasn't born of fear, but the urge to break free with a blade's new edge. Lee Wonbin sensed disaster. If this continued, someone could die. He meant to intervene, but before he could move, the Sword Emperor and I vanished in a blink. Lee Won-bin could only watch, helpless, knowing it was too late. Just as there were only 2 centimeters between the Sword Emperor and me, Medea suddenly appeared, shouting at the Sword Emperor, calling him insane and demanding to know if he even realized he was fighting a student. The Sword Emperor snapped back to himself, hurriedly apologizing to the principal, twice. Back in the office, Medea pressed the Sword Emperor to explain himself. Why would a Sword Emperor unleash sword spirit blessing on a student? They'd known each other for nearly a century, and she'd never once heard him say sorry. Her instincts told her there was more to this than met the eye. What truly shocked her was when the Sword Emperor said that if he hadn't used sword spirit blessing, he would have been overpowered. Medea could hardly believe her ears. The Sword Emperor, with all his pride, actually admitting that? She knew I was different from anyone else, but better than anyone, she understood just how strong the Sword Emperor really was. Before she could process it all, Siegfried went on to say that I had already reached the realm of mental realm. Medea was floored. She blurted, "Siegfried, didn't you only master mental realm at nearly 30? Siegfried muttered to himself, what could possibly offset experience? Medea, reeling, collapsed into a chair. She started to replay the scene in her mind. When she'd separated me and Siegfried, she'd rushed over to check if I was alright. But at that moment, I was still under Sword God's blessing. Tension and killing intent hung thick in the air. For an instant, she felt she'd lost all the authority of a 7-star hero and a teacher. Her mind held only 2 words, pure fear. It was the same feeling she'd had the first time she faced 6th Legion Commander Vasman. She couldn't understand how a mere freshman could inspire such bone-deep dread. But seeing Siegfried's reaction, it didn't seem like a joke. He was never one to joke about these things. Finally, Medea asked quietly, "Don't tell me you lost?" Siegfried immediately leapt up. "Impossible. No matter how gifted Kang Jian-ma is, he's still not my match. Besides, I wasn't even using my full strength." Medea teased, "Aren't you the one who always says true experts don't care about their gear? Now you're making excuses? Doesn't that make you look a little silly?" Siegfried trembled with indignation, but couldn't come up with a retort. In the end, only the clatter of weapons filled the room. That night, lying in bed, I kept replaying my duel with the Sword Emperor. Though it ended safely, I still felt a lingering fear. I'd pushed Sword God's blessing to its limit and still couldn't suppress him. That was the true power of humanity's strongest. If Medea hadn't arrived in time, I'd definitely have been injured. This incident taught me that the Sword Emperor was, at heart, a battle maniac. My mind drifted to the mind's realm I'd entered today. Experiencing it firsthand left me with mixed feelings. As someone who'd played the game before, I knew that mental realm was closely tied to one's mastery and understanding of their weapon, and only by fulfilling multiple conditions could you enter this active dimension. It was said that only the most dedicated lifelong masters of a single weapon had a chance to step into this place. In the game, fewer than 10 heroes could freely access it. Even Leon, who was born with hero's potential, only barely touched mental realm after 3 years of training with the Sword Emperor. It left me wondering, how did I manage it so quickly? Suddenly, I realized it might be connected to my sashimi knife. In my previous life, I was a chef. By age 21, I'd already spent 20 years with a blade, eventually becoming the nation's strongest, known as the Blade God. Every time I activated Sword God's blessing, I entered a state of focus beyond myself. Now, in this complicated world, my life and memories intertwined, helping me break through each obstacle. Looking down at the sashimi knife, I suddenly understood something. If I kept worrying about disrupting the plot and kept running away, it would only make things worse. Rather than letting fate push me around, I might as well act, solving problems one step at a time. With that thought, I got up, ready to see if I could control the blade even without Sword God's blessing. If I could, I'd be able to train for combat even without relying on the blessing. I tried to empty my mind, but nothing happened. So I focused all my attention on the sashimi knife. In that instant, I felt myself stepping into another space. But as soon as I entered, cracks began to spread all around me. A giant hand suddenly reached down through a fissure above my head, reaching for me. Moments later, it crept up behind me, and lightly tapped my sword arm. In a flash, a strange force poured from my arm into the sashimi knife. Sensing something wrong, I opened my eyes, only to see the blade slowly fading away, even the real one in my hand vanishing with it. At the same time, in a hidden room at the academy, several elders conversed in hushed tones. Claddy declared they had to investigate the top special admit, Kang Jian-ma, and asked if everyone agreed to that matter. A nearby elder reminded him that even so, they couldn't send demons. Demons were humanity's sworn foes. Claddy retorted, "Do we really have the luxury of drawing such fine lines with dangerous elements?" The purple-robed elder said, "Wasn't Leon the hero candidate? Is Kang Jian-ma a candidate too?" Claddy sneered, Leon can't even activate blessing. What kind of hero is that? But at the placement exam, Kang Jian-ma instantly defeated the Iron Family twins. And Medea has been covering up all his info, claiming it's to protect special admits. The whole thing reeks of secrets. The 7 stars are trouble enough, we need to eliminate all potential threats before they grow. The one-eyed elder sighed, saying it all felt preordained. Even the Sword Emperor had slipped into the academy. Ever since 7-star Medea became principal, the Elder Council's standing had plummeted. After Vasman was hunted down, the outside world recognized only the 7 stars, the elders were forgotten relics. But in truth, it was the Elder Council that led the people and maintained the balance. Now, with things so precarious, if a true hero appeared, the elders would be even more sidelined. To preserve their power, they needed a common enemy. Any hero who threatened the Demon King must be expelled. Today's events were all Claddy's doing under pressure from Instructor Kim. He pleaded with the council in the cave, knowing full well what fate awaited him if he didn't act. At that moment, the white-robed elder seated at the center finally spoke. Send the order to the Auditore family now. Cut to the blacksmith shop, a hammer clattered to the ground with a clang. I was shaking, veins bulging, pupils blown wide in rage. The blacksmith retreated, begging for mercy. Please, young master, spare me. My fury was because I'd discovered that the Murasame I'd asked to have upgraded had been reforged into a sashimi knife. I'd worked so hard to win that blade, specifically to avoid triggering Sword God's blessing, but now, it was back to square one. Was I really doomed to this fate? Maybe destiny isn't some foreign chain, but something already woven into my flesh and carved into my bones. Every choice, every breath I take, seems to follow a river whose course was set long ago. My feet think they're fighting the current, but in truth, they're just pushing the boat toward the abyss. Maybe, even the thought of rebellion was already written into fate's script.